One rainy day, a girl came to the police station regarding a domestic matter. She stood wearily at the front desk, explaining that her husband had been acting strangely since the previous night. The officer asked her to elaborate on what had happened, and she looked down at the floor sadly. She said what bothered her most was their sex life, which greatly shocked the officer, while a look of utter emptiness crossed her face. That day, for the first time in their 2 years of marriage, she noticed a key detail that immediately made her suspicious of her husband. He had never sweated that much before, not even once, which instantly raised her suspicions. Although the movements were familiar, everything that happened that night seemed to be the complete opposite of his usual behavior. Before this, her husband, Kim Hyun, had always been especially careful and considerate because she was blind. But that time, he was insatiable and rushed, and she couldn't understand the reason behind this change. He had always been a bit dull and slow in bed, but suddenly he became so voracious that it frightened her. He repeatedly left hickeys on her neck, while mumbling something about the marks that should be visible. When he leaned in close and bluntly told her she'd better not do this with anyone else, she couldn't believe her ears. The next morning, he prepared for work as if nothing had happened, and Soryong dutifully saw him off, as usual. She casually mentioned the neighbor was moving out, but he only said that it would be quiet around here soon. She wanted to ask what he meant by that, but he immediately stroked her hair and asked how she felt after last night. She just replied thoughtfully that she never knew intimacy could be so exhausting and painful. Soryong tried to get him to leave for work quickly, but what happened next unsettled her even more. In a moment of inexplicable silence, she suddenly felt their eyes meet, which made her even more nervous. She couldn't see, but she could feel with her whole being that the joy had vanished from her always smiling husband's face. Soryong felt a chill emanating from his expressionless face, and then he said he was leaving. She wanted to ask him about it, but held back, as her doctor had said that being nitpicky and suspicious was a bad sign. The moment the door closed, she faintly heard him say he was quitting his job because his mission was complete. At first, she thought she was overthinking it, but when he didn't come home on time for the first time ever, a new wave of suspicion washed over her. Previously, because of her blindness, he would never leave her alone for too long, but now he wasn't even answering his phone. When she heard that the number she dialed did not exist or was temporarily blocked, she couldn't believe her ears. Her frantic thoughts started with did something happen to him and ended up tangled like a ball of yarn. She was so lost in thought while making dinner that she barely felt the deep cut on her hand until it was too late. The girl had been calling him since morning, but her attempts to reach her beloved husband were completely in vain. Only 2 words remained in her mind: husband missing. She couldn't stop mulling it over. In the end, the police said they could only start a search after he had been missing for 24 hours and that she should wait patiently. When the officer specified that this only applied to non-crime related cases, Soryong was immediately thrown into confusion. Just as he mentioned that someone might disguise an assault as a disappearance, she produced a bloodstained knife. Her gaze fell heavily downward as the officer calmly asked whose blood it was. The girl, devastated by the disappearance of her beloved husband, suddenly had a new plan form in her mind. She unexpectedly asked the man if they would find him faster if she claimed the blood was her husband's. That man was her everything, and they had met when she was around 24. He introduced himself as a company employee, and she met him shortly after discovering an unexpected problem with her retina. The girl was stunned, as she had never had such issues before, which made their encounter particularly memorable. The man thoughtfully gave her a cane for the blind, after which she asked him to stay with her for a while. Soryong explained it was because her hands were full, making it difficult to get around in the heavy rain. The girl couldn't believe that after trying so hard to be a good person, all this crap was happening to her. At that moment, she felt worthless, empty, and pathetic, but then he appeared and showed her a sliver of kindness. The guy guessed she was cold and handed her a cup of hot tea, which, to be honest, really lifted her spirits. She felt his gentle touch and suddenly realized a bright ray of sunshine had pierced through her fading world. He did his best to encourage her, telling her that no matter what problem she faced, her life had to go on. The day after giving her statement at the police station, Soryong heard some crazy news about their house being investigated. The detective said that only Han Soryong's family lived in the building, which she found incredible and which also took him by surprise. He scratched his head, completely baffled as to how everyone else could have moved out of the building in just a few days. The blind girl couldn't believe that not a single person lived in the building, something she should have known. So many unexpected things had happened one after another recently that she could hardly find the right words to express it. She was terrified, shouting that something was very wrong, as she knew she had greeted her neighbors when passing by. Soryong shut her mouth when the officer suddenly turned to the detective. After a brief phone call, he looked away in surprise, tried to process the intelligence he had just received from headquarters. When he said there was no one named Kim Hyun in the citizen registration database at all, Soryong's world collapsed. After that news, her life felt like pure hell, and she lived under a mountain of mental anguish. It had been a full month since her husband's disappearance, and she tried to cope with the loss by going to church. She showed up at church as usual, but the same damn scene kept replaying in her mind. Soryong relentlessly pestered the police, but the detective told her to calm down and threatened to arrest her for obstruction of justice. She tried to get help, but they just kept telling her that there was no information on him and that he might have had ulterior motives. After that, the girl finally realized she was completely alone and no one would help her with this mess. The man on duty greeted her with concern, saying how haggard and tired she looked that day. He wanted her to sit down and rest, but she just said she was fine and kept walking. Halfway to the exit, Soryong suddenly stopped and asked him if he truly believed in things he couldn't see. She told him to open his eyes and not end up like her, but he only said that some things can be known without being seen. Somehow, his words, "Belief doesn't always need a reason," struck a deep chord with her, and she immediately became flustered after he said it. She forced a smile, lowered her head, and said she didn't know why things had turned out this way. Despite never having seen his face, only feeling the warmth and size of his hands, she had fallen in love with him. Soryong saw him as her salvation, as she had never had such a wonderful person in her life. This man was a miracle to her, and then he just vanished as if he had never existed in the first place. After that, she completely broke down, tears welling up in her eyes, saying she had been living too comfortably. To support her, the pastor quoted a Bible verse, saying that their meeting today might be God's will. He added with a smile that if she kept seeking, she would find what she was looking for, and if she kept knocking, the door would be open for her. Soryong didn't pay much attention to his words at first, until she felt a brochure and was instantly shocked. It turned out this organization offered top-tier missing person services throughout South Korea. She wasn't even sure what surprised her more, because another new discovery was that she could actually read all the text written on it. After that, she practically sprinted to the doctor's office, and when the doctor found that her vision had indeed returned, he was stunned. Soryong herself couldn't understand why the fog in her eyes had lifted along with her husband's disappearance. The female doctor sitting across from her immediately contacted the scientific community, whose members confirmed her suspicions. In her entire career as an ophthalmologist, she had never seen anything like it, especially since Soryong had been diagnosed with retinal degeneration 2 years ago. Soryong froze when the doctor suddenly suggested that someone might have been periodically interfering with her optic nerve to paralyze it. She immediately remembered the clinic and how they regularly applied those mysterious eye drops to her retina. It turned out that the guy who smiled and carefully helped protect her vision was her runaway husband. She tried to stay calm and simply asked if her original doctor had been replaced. The female doctor immediately said she had taken over for Dr. Park, who had gotten a great opportunity overseas. Then, Soryong suddenly realized her husband couldn't have been living alone, and she zoned out, completely missing what the doctor was saying. She recalled a fond memory they shared when he told her he had hung their wedding photo on the wall. The girl sadly wondered what expression was on his face at that moment. She kept gently stroking his face, frustrated that she would never be able to see her man's face with her own eyes. He tried to cheer her up, using his hands to pull the corners of her mouth into a smile, saying they both looked incredibly happy in the photo. She was overjoyed that day, completely unaware that years later she would unearth some extremely messy truths about this man. Regarding the man, she went to the agency and found that everything was fake: his name, his company, and even his license plate. It turned out there were no surveillance cameras in the house or on the street, and any potential witnesses had vanished. The person at the agency said it looked like a professional setup and then offered to tell her about the neighbors. She immediately started talking about the young man with the dog who lived next door, saying she had chatted with him before. Now she was determined to find real answers, not just a pile of speculation and possibilities. After the conversation, she looked at herself in the mirror and decided to take back what had unexpectedly become her life in this way. A few days later, she went to the agency's building, hoping to get some new details. As soon as she entered, she calmly asked if they had found anything on her husband. Although they didn't have any good news for her, you could still see a flicker of genuine hope on her face. Finally, when the girl who had been silent, she froze in anticipation. Soryong was completely caught off guard when she decided to speak. The girl jumped up like that, demanding to know who on earth she had been living with all these years. She was about to lose control, saying that for that kind of scumbag, ripping out his tongue wouldn't be enough, which just showed how impulsive she was. The man decided to calm his partner down and introduced himself as Young Pil-gu, the head of the Intelligence Analysis Department of Blast. Blast is a private military company, the kind that provides military services in overseas conflict zones. With this information, Soryong went to a detective agency, which was just a small operation run by a few people. He noticed her suspicious gaze, became a bit flustered, and finally decided to get down to business. When he admitted they couldn't take her case, his partner sitting next to him immediately flared up. When she asked why, he said that most of the neighbors she mentioned also had fake names. When Soryong heard that even the schools and companies were fake, she wanted to crawl into a hole and hide. Luckily for her, the woman struck a thoughtful pose and said that her scumbag husband had made one mistake. She said that even if the names were fake, their neighbor did have a dog, and the dog's name was verified as real. The girl handed her a photo of the pet and added that they had called the vet clinic and gotten the owner's name. The owner was Kim Young-mai, a 67-year-old woman, and then they checked her credit card receipts for the past 5 years. After saying this, the girl smiled smugly and showed her phone. It turned out to be a receipt from a bookstore for a 9th grade National Intelligence Service exam book. After carefully analyzing this information, Soryong couldn't believe this was related to the intelligence agency. The man thoughtfully added that the old woman had a son who probably worked at a publishing house. He also pointed out that field agents often use such jobs as a cover, and he might have infiltrated as a neighbor. This information sounded so incredible that Soryong just blinked in confusion and surprise. She froze when the detective agency employee suddenly asked who on earth she was for someone to do all this to her. The whole thing felt so unreal, as if she had walked into the plot of some detective movie. He couldn't figure out what reason would drive someone to buy an entire building and control a whole neighborhood. The man said very seriously that this scale was not normal for a typical operation or agent. Her mind went blank when he said that a black ops intelligence agent had been monitoring her while disguised as her husband. Only the highest levels of the intelligence agency would know his true identity, making it a nightmare to dig up information. Their main skill is to hide their names and faces and never leave any traces. In the end, the man concluded that if all their speculations were correct, they would never be able to uncover her husband's true identity. He could be hiding for years under different missions, doing this or that completely unnoticed. She had no idea that after the mission, he would return to headquarters and peel off his face like a second skin. The person observing him compared him to a venomous snake shedding its skin. That was Wan Chun, a field support hacker for the Overseas Interest Department of the National Security Agency. He finally looked up from his monitor and asked if his superior had evacuated safely. Li Wuxing, codenamed Mask, hopped into the car and said with a smug smile that he had fled without looking back. The hacker still couldn't believe he had used a silicone mask and even a voice changer, which gave him the creeps. He added that he could never trust anyone again, then rambled on in a nervous tone about how well his superior had acted. The guy confessed that, for a moment, he really thought his boss had fallen in love. He was immediately choked up when the man snapped back that he talked too much. The guy quickly changed the subject to their target, Owl, saying she was really obsessed with him. He also told him about the commotion she had caused at the local police station a month ago by smearing herself with blood. The hacker grew anxious when he heard the car suddenly accelerate, and his superior said nothing afterward. He slowed down, parked the car, and demanded that she clarify whose blood was on her. She said it was from the wound on her arm, but they still ran an expedited background check and discovered the forged documents. Wanshun admitted with a smug smile that Owl was quite sharp and had even managed to get the surveillance footage from the police station. Li Wuxing growled in response that their marriage was fake and he just happened to be playing the husband because she was the target. He told him not to look back and then asked if he was really worried he'd get involved with a civilian. The remark was so conceited and dismissive that the hacker instinctively shut his mouth and bit his lip in frustration. Without waiting for an answer, the superior asked if they should go see the agency that trained black ops agents with no sexual experience. The young man almost exploded when he added that his older brother should have taken him to kindergarten so he could grow up to be a pure little flower. Finally, Li Wuxing concluded grimly that he was forbidden from mentioning the word owl in front of him again and that he should forget all about it. The guy immediately agreed to his terms and then asked how the resignation application was being processed. He suddenly realized that his superior had cut off communication and was leaning back in his seat, remarking on how frustrated he looked. No matter what the man said, the hacker still believed that real feelings might have developed between them during that time. He took one last look at the girl whose life had been ruined, said goodbye, and hoped she would quickly forget their superior. The next day, Soryong went to a cafe to meet with a capable member of the detective agency. The girl still had that same inscrutable expression on her face. The young woman asked in a low voice if she was really planning to defect to North Korea. Soryong calmly told her she was planning to escalate things, which triggered a new wave of surprise. She added that to go after the Black Ops agent, she needed to escalate the incident to at least the level of an international crime. The girl said she wanted her advice, as she herself was a defector from North Korea. She finally concluded that to track down the Black Ops agent who was her husband, she had to be caught by the National Security Agency. When she said she could get into the National Intelligence Service by committing a major mistake, the girl across from her couldn't hide her shock. For some reason, she was convinced that if she did this, she would definitely meet an active agent. She said to her husband, Kim Hyun, in her mind that they would definitely meet again and that he would come for her. A few days later, Soryong began to execute her plan, setting everything up on a border bridge. She was speeding towards a checkpoint where the soldiers were half asleep. They were so absent-minded that they didn't even notice the car speeding towards them. She suddenly remembered her conversation at the cafe when she said she didn't know what she would do if she got caught. Soryong wondered aloud what she should do, whether she should kill him or love him even more. She thoughtfully twirled the straw between her fingers, 1,000 thoughts racing through her mind. Finally, she smiled and declared that every day was already filled with bitterness, leaving her with no real choice. The terrified look on the soldier's face snapped her out of her reverie as he finally spotted her approaching car. Seeing him, the girl slammed on the gas, ignoring his shouts to stop immediately. Soryong crashed through the barricade, mentally prepared to be caught and taken directly to her husband. She glanced at the driver's side window with a sense of secret satisfaction, knowing this would be enough to get her arrested. Finally, she stopped the car and heard the soldiers running towards her, panting from the chase. She tensed up when one of them suddenly collapsed, as if he had fainted. She turned her head in annoyance, trying to figure out why they weren't arresting her like a criminal. Soryong felt a surge of tension and slammed on the gas again, trying to draw more attention. The girl decided to commit a crime, driving without permission towards the bridge leading to North Korea. But she was forced to stop when a bullet shot through her windshield and thick smoke billowed from the engine. Soryong felt herself losing control, gripping the steering wheel with all her might to regain it. In the next moment, the car died, and the thick smoke from the engine announced it was done for. She froze, her face pressed against the airbag, while the soldiers kept shouting at her. Soryong hoped they would just drag her out of the car and take her downtown, so she remained silent. She did as they said, rolling down the window, and then they all shouted that she was under arrest. They were completely bewildered because she remained silent, as if none of this had anything to do with her. At that moment, her body was filled with adrenaline, and she even felt a thrill that her plan was going so smoothly. That night, she was taken to the police station, where they prepared to interrogate her. As a suspect, she showed no reaction as the detectives entered the room, simply lost in her own thoughts. The moment she saw the men walk into the room, she immediately began to brace herself for what was to come. It was as if she didn't hear a word they said, which only made her eerie smile widen. Finally, the man snapped, telling her that all group tours were canceled until the investigation was over. He blamed her for it. He couldn't hide his shock when she calmly replied that it was a good thing, which was completely unexpected. Soryong casually mentioned that a soldier had fainted from hyperventilation and needed to rest in the hospital. The man ran a hand through his hair in frustration, saying that the National Security Act punishes even attempted defections. He also added that every word she said now would affect her case, then asked for her motive for fleeing. After that, he changed the subject and asked who Kim Hyun was, as she had only mentioned his name before. The girl remained incredibly calm and simply stated that the man was her husband. The investigator was clearly skeptical, as according to her documents, she was single. Soryong, knowing they probably wouldn't believe her story, declared that, basically, they had been married for 2 years. The man studied the case file and then asked her to confirm if Kim Hyun had recently reported her missing. When he asked if she had run away from home because of this man, she froze. Without any warning, the girl started talking about the chairman of the State Affairs Commission of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It surprised them even more when she smiled and said her husband used to say those things all the time. Seo added that she initially wanted to report a spy, but things were complicated because she didn't know his real name or what he looked like. She gave the person across from her a meaningful look and said that she had been living with a spy all this time. A hint of madness flashed in her eyes as she looked back at them and told them to find him themselves. She added confidently that the man was really Kim Hyun, who had defected to North Korea, and it would be a disaster if they missed him. The girl looked away and talked about the unknown damage he could cause to the country, so they had to catch him. These words threw the investigators' thoughts into chaos, and they couldn't say a word until the phone rang. Seo listened intently to every word, observing the man's reaction as he spoke with the deputy director. She glanced in surprise at the room's window, then heard them say they were ending the investigation. The man thought they would chalk up this escape attempt to a mental breakdown and settle it with a 10 million won fine. Realizing things were getting out of control, she screamed at the top of her lungs that her husband might be a spy. She tried to urge them to continue the investigation, but the detectives were almost at the door. Seo kept shouting that this was impossible until a completely unexpected thought struck her. She managed to stop them in their tracks by suddenly claiming they knew Kim Hyun. The girl slammed her hands on the table and hysterically questioned why they were so desperate to cover something up. They couldn't take their eyes off her as she rambled on about how sloppy the spy-catching department was. Seo suddenly made eye contact with the people behind the mirror and told them to come out. Before smashing the mirror, she walked straight toward the woman and threatened to play hide-and-seek with her, which infuriated the men. She flew into a rage when they told her to stop playing games and just end the investigation. Afterward, she angrily swept a stack of files off the table, screaming that they were the ones playing games. She kept asking what was so special about her husband that they couldn't even conduct a basic investigation. Seo leaned over the table, clutching her hair tightly, and demanded to know what they were hiding. It seemed her hysterical fit was so intense that she needed a moment to catch her breath. When one of the men asked if she was on the wrong medication, she looked at him in surprise. He guessed that she had stopped taking her medicine a long time ago, which was why she was having these crazy ideas about her husband's disappearance. Just as she started to ask about the medication, he cut her off coldly, saying they had already checked with her doctor. Seo was so shocked to hear this that she even began to doubt if she had really seen a doctor. Then, they handed her a medical report, which she immediately devoured. The report was from Haemin Gonggyang Hospital, the same one she had been going to since she learned of her diagnosis as a child. Seo seemed to have completely forgotten about her visits there, which immediately set off alarm bells in her head. The next day, she headed to the clinic that had been examining and treating her. Shortly before her visit, the doctor was watching the news which reported on a woman's attempt to escape to North Korea. He was completely stunned when he realized that the person was his own patient, who was only 20 years old. Before he could process the news, a smiling Seoseon suddenly appeared before him with a bag, as if nothing major had happened. She placed the gift bag on the table and helped herself to tea as if she owned the place. The doctor seemed even more shocked that she had shown up without her cane and that the vision problems that had caused her blindness were gone. Seoseon just calmly said she was getting better, all the while suspecting he might have been influencing her condition. She was glad the condition was reversible, calling the whole thing ironic, before returning to the table. Just as the doctor asked how she was doing and getting along with her husband, she caught him off guard by asking why he ran away. She pondered why he would abandon her, when she had been as well-behaved and sweet as he had taught her be. The man was quite frightened as she continued, saying she was as docile as a puppy and always obedient. Noticing the doctor's significant mood change, she began to talk about how long she had endured and tried to live a good life. During that time, she had quit the gymnastics team, been expelled from school, and even worked as a caregiver, but it all ended in a mess. Every word about being abandoned made him more nervous, especially since he played a major role in shaping her. Finally, she asked why some people would betray those they cherished, and then Seoseon turned back to look at the doctor. Somehow, her cold gaze sent a chill down his spine as she bluntly asked why her husband did it. He felt extremely uncomfortable under her sharp stare, feeling as if he couldn't even open his mouth. The man awkwardly looked away and played dumb, as if he didn't understand what she was talking about. He had barely taken a sip from his cup when she mentioned past rumors of the mafia poisoning black tea. That doctor had manipulated her for years for his own ulterior motives, which was why she was hinting at betrayal. Her words hit him so hard that he froze like a statue, feeling his life was in danger. Before he knew it, he collapsed on the floor, coughing violently with a burning sensation in his throat. Finally, Seoseon stood before him, accusing him of turning her into a schizophrenic and ruining her life. She demanded he name the person behind it all, and when he didn't answer directly, she stepped on him. Seoseon pressed her heel firmly on his throat, guessing it had something to do with her husband and was something she needed to investigate further. She politely mentioned that her husband's work confused her, then aggressively demanded he spill the details. The girl was stunned when he finally rasped that he was just told to carry out a certain task. The doctor tried to argue, saying he initially thought it wouldn't harm her. After getting the information she needed, Seoseon finally removed her foot from his throat and reached for her teacup. The man couldn't hide his surprise when she actually started drinking the tea. He still couldn't figure out why she was so calm and watched her every move. After a brief pause, Seoseon turned back and asked the terrified doctor who exactly had given him the order. He immediately stammered, barely managing to say that he was told the order came from a certain government department. He added that they later gave him a business card for a publishing house, which meant the person worked there. Seoseon immediately connected his words with what the detective from the special agency she had contacted had told her. At that moment, the girl was once again convinced that her life for the past few years had been a carefully orchestrated play by someone else. She realized that the longer she searched for her husband, the more she felt her entire reality was a lie. That man had woven a web like a damn spider, completely messing up her life and making it sick and meaningless. It seemed she was only now realizing that everything around her had always been clear, but she herself had failed to see it. Now she blamed herself for being too stupid and naive, which was why she got into this mess in the first place. Finally, Seoseon walked towards the door, then turned to the doctor one last time, reminding him that he was the one who taught her to wear a mask. He was completely caught off guard when she suggested she wanted to end their therapy. The girl froze, realizing she wanted to shatter that mask and just release the simple desire to live peacefully in love and harmony. She felt an incredible pain when she realized she still considered her family life the happiest time of her life. Suppressing her emotions, Seoseon bid the doctor farewell, completely ending their doctor-patient relationship. She turned a new page in her life, realizing that this stolen family life was her ugly, true face. After this heavy visit to the doctor who had been with her throughout her treatment, Seoseon felt a deep longing. Even though her husband treated her like dirt, she was still obsessed with him like a stray dog with its owner. She lay on the floor, trying to absorb the last traces of his scent from his belongings, recalling all their happy moments. These fragments of memory haunted her day and night, causing her to sometimes lose touch with reality. Even now, during a casual coffee date with the girl, she was still lost in her own thoughts. Knowing the girl was eager to hear the details of her recent escape attempt, she said that although she wasn't injured, she had to pay a fine. When her friend learned she was fined 10 million won, she slapped her forehead, completely stunned. Afterward, she was genuinely surprised that Soryong still wanted to meet after all that chaos. Despite this, Soryong remained calm, as if none of it mattered to her. She just casually said that she didn't know anyone else in this line of work and needed to kidnap someone. The girl was still brainstorming her arrest plan and decided her target had to be someone of significant status. She suddenly thought of the deputy director of the National Intelligence Service. Little did she know, her irresponsible husband was that very person. He was hanging out at a tattoo parlor, disrespectfully taking a call from that guy. He was tired of talking about business and practically snarled that he was ready to smash his phone to pieces. The person on the other end of the line pleaded with him to come back soon, while he nonchalantly got some Russian phrases tattooed on his body. The husband just said he was waiting for his resignation to be approved. This infuriated the deputy director, who immediately started ranting about how hard it was to replace an agent like him. He went on to say that things had been smooth for 10 years, but then 2 intelligence agents suddenly died on this mission. He was furious that Li Wuxin wanted to quit just because of some personal crap, especially at a time like this. In his resignation letter, he had only written some nonsense about being mentally ill, which was simply not going to work. Just as the deputy director asked if he was crazy, Li Wuxin broke into a smug grin. He leaned back coolly in his chair and, with that crazy smile, asked if the guy really thought he was sane. The other person didn't answer, just wanted to know what was wrong with him and why he had abandoned him after the mission. But the agent wasn't buying it, reminding him that he had already said he had mental problems. He started rambling about how much he wanted to show his true face and stop wearing a mask. But the hospital called it an obsessive thought. Li Wuxin added that he had to do it himself, or he would go crazy and tear his own face off due to hallucinations. After that crazy confession, he said he didn't want to be an agent anymore because he now had a tattoo near his groin. When he said he couldn't even have a sex life anymore, the person on the other end of the line slammed his fist down, calling him a complete lunatic. He berated him for what he had done to his body, saying his body belonged to the state. Then he called him a madman again, bringing up the fact that he had even slept with a virgin, implying the mission's target. Li Wuxin told him to shut up, saying he wouldn't wear a mask anymore if they didn't give him his old face back. The deputy director decided to play his last card, asking if he really didn't want that document anymore. Li Wuxin retorted sharply that he hadn't given up, and his actions didn't mean he had abandoned his goal. He got up from his chair in a daze and suddenly started talking about his inner struggles. The man candidly admitted that for 10 years, he was just tired of not being able to be himself, of pretending to be someone else for the sake of a mission. He added that even though he lived without, he still failed and now had nothing. Li Wuxin zipped up his pants, saying it sucked not even having a place to vent his anger. So this was how he had to let out. Just then, the deputy director suddenly said he was one step away from heading the NRC and would be able to grant his request in the future. He unexpectedly added that this time he would let him use his own face and name because he needed him as a pawn. It seemed only after hearing these words did the agent start to listen, after which he said he would ask him for one last favor. Li Wuxin decided to confirm once more if he could really stop hiding and operate with his own name and face. He got an affirmative answer, then just closed his eyes, sighed, and asked what they needed him to do. Finally, he became very quiet and pensive when the man asked if he had heard of a mercenary group called Blast. Meanwhile, Soryong was actually talking about the same organization with her super enthusiastic new friend. She rambled on that even if she was just a deputy supervisor or a boss, she would need basic kidnapping skills. The girl offered to train her, saying her organization had plenty of experts in that area. For some reason, Soryong wasn't keen on the idea and asked if the training was really necessary. The other woman immediately said she was too naive, saying all the NRC buildings were crawling with guards, making it difficult to strike. Finally, she grinned and said Soryong reminded her of her sister in North Korea and that she was special. Soryong didn't react much to her words, just kept thinking about the Blast organization. For some reason, it made her wonder if people like her husband always went around in circles like this. Deep down, she still hoped she could forget the man and finally be free in the crowd. But she knew in her heart that she had to choose a different path, and the look in the other woman's eyes confirmed it. She thought about her words again and realized that, yes, she had a point. The girl knew that in a world built on power, she needed skills and strength to catch the person she needed. Furthermore, she knew she needed backup, which meant she had to recruit a gang. After figuring all this out, she finally asked the woman about the man she had run into at the police station. She vaguely remembered him being the leader of the Blast gang. Then the woman suddenly said he was her brother-in-law. This casual remark immediately caught Soryong's attention, and an idea flashed in her mind. It seemed the woman didn't fully realize the weight of her words, as she only showed surprise on her face. Soryong remained calm, though she suddenly felt like a predator that had caught the scent of its prey. The memory of the meeting flashed in her mind, and a clear thought took over. She concluded that the two were relatives, which would surely come in handy in the future. Afterward, she decided to visit the gang leader and cut to the chase, asking him how much he knew about Chang-rae. Soryong casually mentioned that she had heard Chang-rae had some sort of relationship with him. The man just stared at her in confusion when she said Chang-rae was his wife's sister. Then she handed him a voice recorder, saying she had contacted him to warn him about some trouble. The recording was from one of their chats, which she had managed to record without Chang-rae noticing. He felt a chill run down his spine as he heard Chang-rae talk about her husband and how she felt about him. Seeing the reaction she wanted, Soryong coldly began to talk about her attempt to escape to North Korea. Across the border. Immediately after, Chang-rae's voice came from the recorder, offering several excellent escape methods. He couldn't believe his colleague, his own cousin, would betray him like this with her escape plan. Soryong decided to threaten him, saying she would report her the next time he tried to escape. Just as she calmly put the evidence back in her bag, the man slammed his hands on the table in anger and glared at her. She could tell he was about to explode, but she decided to play another card she had up her sleeve. She slowly placed a flyer in front of him, mentioning some dirt on his sister's husband. Soryong looked him straight in the eye and asked if he was really an agent for the National Intelligence Service. She fell silent and folded the flyer in half while the man kept demanding to know what she was really after. She folded the flyer into a paper airplane, ignoring his questions, and called him a very loyal guy. She glanced at a heart-shaped figurine, implying he had left the intelligence service to get married and take care of North Korean defectors. Those defectors were his sisters, and he had been covering for them, so he couldn't let Chang-rae become a suspect. She dangled the figurine in front of him, adding that it would also affect his wife, which I guess was a direct threat. It was then that the man realized he was caught, and to keep her quiet, he had to cooperate. After what felt like an eternity, young Pil-gu rubbed his head and asked what she really wanted. The man couldn't believe his ears when Soryong bluntly said she wanted a job. She looked away thoughtfully, mentioning that before they met, she had been investigating the Blast Company. It turned out to be a subsidiary of the Seiwa Group, one of the world's top 3 conglomerates. They provided services to various clients in East Asia, from conflict countries to damn drug cartels. In addition, the company also handled matters for legitimate sovereign nations and humanitarian organizations, which basically made them a private military company with the most diverse client base you could imagine. They also offered a wide range of military services, contracting with governments around the world. This secret operation was incredibly profitable, and I'm talking about deals sometimes worth hundreds of billions of won. Soryong hinted that intelligence agencies also turned to them when they were short on personnel for operations. Young Pil-gu immediately understood what she meant and asked in confusion why she was looking for something like that. But she just stuck to her guns, saying she just needed a job, which confused him even more. The man thought it over and said that Blast only hired people with military skills. He added that they were mainly interested in former Ministry of Defense employees, National Intelligence Service agents, Special Forces, and retired military personnel. Soryong started to explain what she could do, but he cut her off, saying her attempt to defect to North Korea was enough. He was taken aback when she just calmly said she wasn't talking about killing people, but about cleaning rooms. Now young Pil-gu was seriously considering her words, as he had originally thought she was referring to assassination. In the end, he recommended her to the company, where she planned to work as a cleaner. Considering her resume, the HR manager was surprised by the formal attitude she showed during the interview. He ended up telling her she could start on Monday, and all she had to do was clean, cook, and wash dishes. After saying that, he looked back at her resume in confusion, then sized up the young woman. He was suddenly excited that a young woman wanted to work for them, as they usually avoided the place. His creepy gaze immediately swept over her body, and he felt that their men would finally have the motivation to work. Soryong surprised him by asking if there was a lot of danger here, since most of the people were military. He tried to say that many men would want to protect her, but she just told him to watch his mouth. After the interview, she didn't even notice him as she walked past, immediately taking a call from Chang-rae. She casually mentioned that the interview went well, completely unaware of what kind of pervert she had just passed. A month passed since that day, and Soryong started working as a cleaner at the blast office. Her colleague smiled and told her to hurry up because there was another table to clear. She calmly returned to her work, pushing a cart full of leftovers that looked like sludge from a swamp. Just as she started moving, she overheard some people talking about an opening in the task force. Soryong pricked up her ears, listening carefully as he said this task force handled all security matters. On top of that, one of them was very excited about the new boss, who had a terrible reputation. He was painting a picture of the man, saying he already had all his subordinates wrapped around his little finger. Soryong seized on these words like an eagle eyeing its prey, because she was interested in that very security task force. Shortly before this, she had met with Chang-rae, who was eager to learn more details about her job. She couldn't help but remember her friend asking if she liked her job and if everything was okay. The girl excitedly pressed her for details about her colleagues, thinking they must all be smitten by her beauty. Soryong pushed her hand away and asked where she was working now, as she hardly ever saw her. Chang-rae hesitated, looking surprised, as if she didn't want to talk about the details of her job. She turned her face away wearily and just said that her new boss was a total psycho. The offhand remark made her suddenly think that Chana might be working in that special operations unit. She still couldn't figure out why it was so fucking hard to find out what that unit actually did. Just as she was pondering how high the level of secrecy of their work was, she heard a scream nearby. A big guy had suddenly lost control, lunging at some poor fellow and unleashing all his anger and frustration. His face twisted in anger. He menacingly demanded the man repeat what he had just said. The other person retorted that it was annoying how he was dying to get in, yet remained so tight-lipped on the topic of the Special Operations Unit. The first man nearly threw a punch, roaring that he had no right to talk to him like that, and accusing him of being jealous and afraid of being left behind. Ryan was stunned by how the two were arguing endlessly as if they had nothing better to do. Then, in a flash, she noticed a terrified employee caught in the middle of their fight. The female employee was holding a tray and had just seen the two big guys flying toward her. At the last moment before hitting the ground, she somehow managed to get back on her feet, a sharp pain shooting through her already weak body. This Annie had complained about back pain before, but the furious agents didn't even glance at her. Ryan felt the pressure, overwhelmed, as every choice seemed like a potential disaster. She suddenly announced calmly that she was going to mop the floor and quickly pushed her cart forward, surprising the other female employees. She was heading for the two fighting guys, so they didn't notice her until the last second. The big guy saw her rushing over with a large pot of soup and tried to stop her, asking what she was doing. But before he could react, the huge pot came crashing down, splashing soup all over them. The guy was so stunned by her audacity that he couldn't say a word. He wanted to teach her a lesson, but Ryan just coldly told him that lunch break was over. Immediately after, she was called into the manager's office for a scolding over her behavior in the cafeteria. He pointed his finger at her, saying that while she had always been rude and bold, she had gone too far this time. He explained that this company supported combat personnel, and they were just support staff who took care of them. The moment she mentioned that they should check on Annie Kim's back, he hissed that she didn't know her priorities. He added that the big guy she provoked had a bad temper and was now thoroughly pissed off at her. After being told to stay away from him for the time being, the girl left the office with heavy steps. She had a towel on her head because she had also been splashed with soup just before this conversation. Standing by the elevator, she couldn't help but wonder how she was supposed to kidnap someone with a boss like that. Ryan racked her brain for other ways to achieve her goal, but felt she would never find a better errand than this. The elevator doors slid open with a ding, and a group of men in suits were standing right there. The man in the elevator gave her the creeps, so she decided to wait for the next one. He was stunned to run into his former target at the place he now worked. Even though her face was hidden behind the white towel, he felt instinctively that it was definitely her. He wanted to wait for her to take the elevator with him, but she missed it and gave him one last look. Ryan studied his pensive yet calm face, which for some reason made her uneasy. She watched him for what felt like an eternity before the elevator doors finally closed and left, making way for the next one. Standing among the other employees, she pricked up her ears as she overheard snippets of their conversation. They were bitching about the new boss nobody liked and the rumors about him spending a long time in Africa. The men couldn't believe he was only 31, as he had joined the army as soon as he turned 18 and went straight into the special forces. Ryan quickly pieced together the clues for what the angry guys were saying and concluded that he was the new boss. She was suddenly faced with his stereotypical military appearance, as if she couldn't believe that annoying section chief was him. Afterward, she returned to her post, where a pissed-off soldier was giving her a hard time. He kept demanding she wash his clothes over and over, saying they still smelled of the leftovers she had spilled. Without hesitation, she picked up the garment, saying she had already washed it more than 20 times this week. He started to get annoyed, asking if she knew who he was, to which she calmly replied that his name was embroidered on his uniform. To her surprise, he just grinned and asked if she was always this uninteresting. He told her to stop staring at him so hard, even though he was looking her up and down himself. Meanwhile, the guy accused her of staring so intently, thinking she might be interested in him. Despite the danger hanging over her head, Ryan bluntly asked him if he wanted to sleep with her. The guy was caught off guard, grinning as he wondered aloud what kind of woman she was. When he dared to ask if she knew anything about Confucianism, Ryan shot him a harsh glare. The agent held his breath when she shamelessly told him that wasn't the point. He advanced on her menacingly, asking what the big deal was about sleeping with him once. He thought she would back down and shut up, but she just confidently apologized, saying she doesn't sleep around. She began to thoughtfully list her ex-husband's stats, saying he had to be over 6'2" and under 175 pounds. Her tormentor couldn't hide his surprise as she started talking about the exact dimensions his junk needed to be. When she said her husband was just like that, he froze like a caveman and started covering his crotch. At first, he was blinded by lust until he finally understood the true meaning of her words. He jumped up in anger, pointing at her and cursing her for not mentioning she was married. Ryan ignored him, so he demanded she stop staring and go get her shower pass like a soldier. She complied with his words, said understood, and shuffled toward the exit. But she froze and turned around when the bastard called out to her again. He was blushing and complaining again, asking if she really had a husband. Ryan was stunned to see his hurt and flustered face, as if she were talking to a teenager. She cursed him in her mind for being a complete idiot, pulled her mask up higher, and left without giving him an answer. Leaving him alone, she hurried to the showers, where she had left her pass while washing up. Now that it was over, she lowered her gaze wearily, thinking she would rather defect to North Korea 100 times. Ryan was so lost in thought that she didn't even notice a man showering in one of the stalls. He continued showering as if nothing was wrong until she yelled out, asking if anyone was in there. The guy stopped in surprise, cursing and wondering who the hell would be in the showers right now. Seeing her standing there, he grinned and asked if she wanted to join him, which thoroughly annoyed her. He looked around with a sly smile and told her she'd better leave quickly because the others would be coming soon. Ryan kept her head down until she accidentally caught a glimpse of a tattoo on his thigh. She started examining the phrase written near his junk, which caught him completely off guard. The Special Forces section chief seemed to make a point of it, cursing her as a shameless slut, as if she wasn't just looking at the tattoo. To his surprise, she kept staring intently at his groin area, which at first just made him laugh. But he was even more shocked when he noticed her crazily focused gaze, as if she had discovered something. He suddenly realized this was that girl and angrily ripped off her mask. His face was twisted with uncontrollable rage, and he even called her Owl. He crushed the mask he had torn from her face, his fists starting to tremble with rage. The boss glared at her, relentlessly questioning what she was doing here. He seemed to have forgotten he was even naked as he kept pressing her for an answer. Ryan sensed the danger, apologized for disturbing him, and promised to leave immediately. Just as he was about to stop her, he heard other agents entering the shower room, just as he had warned her. One of them asked Sun Wook-chan if he had really scolded that cleaning lady earlier today. Meanwhile, as more men poured in, Lee Woo-sung kept closing in on the girl, shielding her with his body. She wanted him to back off, but he just said blankly that he needed to think. Ryan started to protest, but he met her gaze again, asking what she was doing here. Meanwhile, the others stumbled upon the past someone had left in the shower, much to Sun Wook-chan's annoyance. Little did they know, their boss was busy finding out what his former target was doing in the company. The girl confidently stated that she was just here to cook and clean, and that it was none of his business and not enough to stop her. She added that she wouldn't be scared by the sight of a few naked men, but she didn't like the situation unfolding between them. Ryan tried to shake off his hand, demanding he back away, but he pinned her against the wall again. The moment he accidentally brushed against her shirt, she immediately noticed a change in his lower body. She couldn't believe her eyes when she noticed how similar it was to her husband's. The girl started struggling to break free, demanding he let her go, but only the water gushing from the faucet released her. In his moment of hesitation, she seized the opportunity and fled as fast as she could. It all happened so fast that even Lee Woo-sung didn't know what to do, considering his body's sudden reaction. The way she looked him straight in the eye had unsettled him and even aroused him a little. After a moment, he decided to contact his hacker, who immediately started grilling him about his findings on Blast Corporation. Lee Woo-sung didn't answer his question and just asked directly why Owl was here, which completely stumped the guy. He was so surprised that he immediately started asking about the girl, only to get a harsh scolding from his boss. Lee Woo-sung asked if he had already developed feelings for the target, wondering how such an idiot could even dream of getting paid. After a string of insults, the guy finally managed to dig up information on a recently hired girl. He quickly scanned the public data of the 27-year-old woman working in the procurement department. Afterward, he immediately started worrying if she had recognized him, even though he wasn't wearing his usual mask or using a voice changer. Getting no answer, he suddenly asked if she was visibly hurt, which his boss found amusing. As soon as he heard another sarcastic reply, he immediately threw his own words back at him, that he had asked not to hear anything about her. Right after, he dropped a bombshell on him, saying the girl had tried to defect to North Korea. Not long ago, she had even accused him of being the spy Kim Hyun and demanded an investigation into him during her escape attempt. Lee Woo-sung was stunned that his once meek wife would do such a thing and even mention him. He had always thought of her as a sweet, lonely girl who wouldn't dream of doing something like this in a million years. She seemed like the type who would silently accept a mundane life without a single complaint. In all their years together, she was the sweetest, calmest, and most submissive woman he could have imagined. He refused to believe she could have turned into that and ordered the hacker to dig up everything on her so he could eliminate her later. The day after the whole incident, Ryan went back to work as if nothing had happened. She was still thinking about yesterday's encounter with her boss, who got angry because she was always staring at people. What bothered her was that even though she hadn't seen her husband, the first thing she did after her vision returned was to check out this guy's equipment. She replayed the pervert's body in her mind, noticing that his junk was bent just like her husband's. This brought back memories of touching her husband's thing, which he called his biggest insecurity. During those nights together, he would gently stroke her hand and say that his shape was different from others. Then he would start kissing her, but not before admitting he was ashamed of how it looked. She was so lost in those pleasant memories that she barely noticed someone calling her name. Her colleague placed several bags on the table and asked her to deliver lunch to the construction site. As the woman chattered on about the workers, Ryan still couldn't shake the blush from her face. Despite the similarities she found between her husband and her boss, she still knew he wasn't Kim Hyun. Shaking off her thoughts, she finally got down to business, changing her clothes to go deliver the lunch. She rolled her eyes wearily as soon as she heard the voice of the guy she hated. He was standing coolly by the car with his arms crossed, telling her to hurry up and get in. Lee Woo-sung was practically gloating, as if enjoying ordering her around, saying the workers were hungry. As soon as she got in the car, they headed straight for the construction site, which she was not excited about. She was also confused that he had started talking to her like an old friend after the shower incident. Afterward, the girl thought carefully about all the rumors she had heard about him and felt they must be true. It seemed Ryan was so lost in thought that it unsettled Lee Woo-sung, who was driving. He suddenly decided to break the awkward silence and asked her how she felt about her current job. After getting a short answer, he asked if she knew Young Pil-gu, who had given her the recommendation letter. The girl didn't want to answer his questions, after which he said there was an opening on his team because someone was injured. He hinted that she could get the position and said the more honest she was, the better. Lee Woo-sung smiled slyly, unwrapping a lollipop, and said that if she understood correctly, he was asking for her cooperation. Ryan was skeptical of his words, wondering if he was threatening to drag her on a business trip if she didn't answer. Seeing her hesitation, the boss demanded she stop stalling, after which she briefly replied that they barely knew each other. The guy cleverly pointed out that she privately knew a man who had a wife and child. When he asked about her preference for married men, the girl couldn't hide the flash of anger on her face. She wondered aloud if he had any idea what he was asking, given his subtle insinuation. He just replied eagerly that since she was being brief, he would keep his thoughts brief as well. Ryan glared at him in annoyance as he asked if she wanted him to be even briefer. Only then did the girl reluctantly say that she didn't actually know Young Pil-gu himself, but was more familiar with his young assistant. She was visibly surprised when he suddenly said that Ho Chana was a rather talented hacker. Lee Woo-sung was talking about how the Bangladesh National Bank almost lost $1 billion in 2016 due to a hack. It turned out the North Korean government was behind it, and the one who pulled it off was a 16-year-old girl. He then smiled slyly at her and asked how she had latched onto this gold mine, referring to Ho Chana. Ryan remained tight-lipped, asking if she was obligated to tell him about her private life. Despite her reticence, Lee Woo-sung still wanted information, asking if it was such a big secret. She froze when he suddenly asked if he was asking her to illegally obtain someone's private data. The guy decided to bring their conversation to a head, saying that since she didn't want to cooperate, he would be direct. He announced that he was making a list of personnel for an overseas mission, and she shouldn't go if she was easily spooked. Seeing her confusion, he concluded that despite her disgust, she should satisfy his curiosity to avoid suffering there. After he finished speaking, the girl suddenly began to nervously think about things that could harm her if she went with them. The guy didn't realize he had only made her more interested and said he would let her off if she answered directly. Knowing she had to join anyway to get the NRF's attention, she decided to go along with his plan. She suddenly said with great sarcasm that the NRF was too weak to poach Ho Chana. Ryan suggested that the NRF might have screwed up the recruitment due to incompetence, which should have provoked him. After she finished, Lee Woo-sung suddenly looked away, lost in thought, and asked if they had really taken all her money. The girl looked straight ahead confidently and said they took much more than that, as a person can lose more than just cash. Just as he asked if that was why Ho Chana was catching criminals, she cut him off, asking if he wanted to join the revenge. He probably knew who she was talking about, and guessed she hadn't caught him yet. It seemed his comment about how much she must hate the guy had managed to pique some of her interest. She suddenly grinned and said she didn't even know if she hated him, as she was still on the hunt. Lee Woo-sung's face darkened when she said she wouldn't give up even if it took months or years. Finally, she said in a tone of complete determination that she had no regrets and it was too early to seek any sympathy. After a short pause, the section chief said that if she didn't realize she was wasting her time, then she had picked the wrong person to mess with. As they approached their destination, Ryan retorted that he had messed with her as they were destined to meet. The girl froze as the car stopped, and she looked at him when he mentioned he hadn't even introduced himself yet. The man gave the girl a sly look and said he was the Wuxing section chief of the Special Security Bureau. With those words, the girl went on alone, as he said it was dangerous outside due to protests and he would stay in the car. She decided to finish the errand as quickly as possible, cursing all the way about what an annoying person he was. Despite the unpleasant conversation, all her thoughts were occupied by the opportunity to be sent overseas. She was so preoccupied with figuring out how to find an assistant that she didn't notice the man until the last moment. The smiling guy took the bags from her hands and sincerely thanked her for delivering the lunch. He smiled and wished her a safe trip back before bouncing away, but she noticed something strange. The place smelled exactly like her husband, Kim Hyun. Ryan was so immersed in that heart-wrenchingly familiar scent that she actually caught the guy's attention. Overwhelmed by the pain of separation and longing, she started following him, which completely bewildered him. She suddenly stared at the guy as if possessed, asking to watch him eat. Realizing how crazy that sounded, she just asked if he had a good appetite, but he told her it was dangerous there. He warned her that they were undercover trying to break up a union and, for some reason, asked for her phone number. Ryan even wondered if he could be her husband, but she quickly came to her senses. She took another good look at the guy and realized he was too built and looked nothing like her husband. After a quick glance, she turned around and flatly refused him, telling him to enjoy his meal. Every time she examined how much she missed Kim Hyun, the humiliation and resentment inside her grew. She was torn between longing for him and wanting to kill him. The moment she turned around, her grumpy boss stopped her, asking if she knew that guy. She tried to recall him, saying he would wait in the car, but he just said he was too curious. Li Wuxing decided to mess with her, saying he wasn't even sure if she was delivering lunch or a person. He grinned and asked who she was staring at so longingly, but she had reached her limit. His indifferent gaze, filled with a sick sense of pleasure, kept provoking her and driving her crazy. The stress had been building up inside her rapidly since Kim Hyun disappeared, and she was about to break. Even though she knew it was just a way to vent, she told her boss she was staring because she missed him. With tears in her eyes, Ryan said she was just following a scent she liked, and there was nothing strange about it. The moment he questioned her, she ran off, saying it was a scent that could drive a person mad. He started racking his brain about her words regarding the scent until he came to a searing conclusion. It seemed his question about whether she was smoking weed shocked her even more. She was dumbfounded by his clueless and completely absurd question. She froze on the spot. Then she rushed upstairs, saying she wouldn't change for him, so she was going on the business trip. Before he could answer, an egg smashed against his back from out of nowhere. He didn't see the scene gathering behind him, a sight that made Soryong panic. A large group of employees, who looked like they were from the main office, was rushing toward them. Sensing the danger, Soryong grabbed his jacket, demanding he start the car immediately. Even as they were surrounded by a large group of angry guys, he kept interrogating her about whether she used drugs. His excuse was that she had been glaring at everyone, and they couldn't take an addict with them. Li Woo-sung ignored her demand to unlock the car doors, simply asking what scent was making her so panicked. When she said she smelled her husband's scent, he couldn't hide his shock and froze on the spot. So Ryong fumbled for the car keys, cursing him for being unresponsive until she noticed his hand. Li Woo-sung calmly punched that chicken shit face and decided to state his opinion on the current situation. He said that her deciding to follow a random guy just because of his scent was simply reckless. He scoffed, saying it was just the stench of some cheap man, and added that he couldn't entrust his team to a pervert. To his surprise, she said confidently that her husband was one of a kind and his scent wasn't disgusting. Li Woo-sung didn't understand why she was still so persistent after he had disappeared and betrayed her. He fell into deep thought, then decided it was best for Ms. Han, Soryong, not to be here. The boss ignored the eggs being thrown at them and told her to pack her bags for a trip. A few days later, they arrived in Bangkok with a mission to protect a major drug lord on the run. Soryong's partner suddenly asked if she liked money, and when she said no, he guessed she would quit. He said that usually, people who don't need money that much turn pale with fright and run away after seeing a cruel scene. To his surprise, Soryong showed no reaction, only saying she needed to clean up, which made him ask if she was scared. The girl was clearly amused by his negative reaction, so she suddenly smirked and called the whole thing a gold mine. She repeated this to herself, saying it was a gold mine that even the National Intelligence Service would be excited about. Encouraged by these thoughts, Soryong walked forward, wondering if this company was even worse than she had imagined. Despite her racing thoughts, she nonchalantly started her daily work. As she was dusting, a voice from behind asked if she had signed a confidentiality agreement. The girl silently turned her head and saw Li Woo-sung, the man who had dragged her into this mess, talking to her. After a brief pause, she calmly turned away and answered curtly that she had signed the confidentiality agreement. Li Woo-sung suddenly smirked, asking why she was still here now that she knew the nature of the job. He walked up behind her and asked why she was on her knees cleaning up filth when she knew what kind of dirty work they did here. At that moment, Soryong just continued kneeling, trying to wipe away the dust, though she hadn't expected the boss to get so close so casually. She pointed to the rag and said she was cleaning because the place was a complete health hazard. The girl secretly enjoyed the changing expression on her boss's face, who seemed to have expected a completely different answer. She gleefully told herself how much her answer annoyed him, as he had clearly expected another kind of reaction. Lee Woo-sung suddenly grabbed his head in frustration, scolding her that she was here to assist in a crime. He also mentioned that she was here to cook for the scumbags who were gathering weapons to protect a drug lord. Just as he finished saying they would kill if necessary, she immediately retorted that he was the one who brought her here. It seemed Lee Woo-sung sensed her bad mood and asked again if she really wanted to clean a place like this. He kept hovering around her, demanding an answer to this simple question, which she clearly didn't want to give. Soryong herself wasn't entirely sure about the true purpose of this mission, which made it difficult for her to answer. Noticing her silence, Lee Woo-sung smirked and said he was just trying to scare her and that she should just do her job as usual. With that, he calmly turned and left, feeling her burning gaze on his back as she cursed him in her mind. Soryong remained sitting on the floor, thinking that no matter how many times she dealt with him, the conversations were still so unpleasant. She knew her life was extremely difficult in today's society, but she was also in awe of how important Lee Woo-sung was now. She knew he was a valuable asset to the National Intelligence Service, which was why she had ultimately agreed with him. Realizing she didn't want to keep her distance anymore, she asked him what he wanted for breakfast. The next day, as if nothing had happened, she was taking a walk nearby with her hacker friend. The energetic girl looked excitedly at the local food stalls, with Soryong following beside her. She suddenly called out to Chana and frankly admitted that she actually enjoyed being with dangerous guys like them. Chana was stunned when she added that she was inspired by this place and even by the nasty employees. After saying this, Soryong wondered mysteriously if her husband, the agent from the National Intelligence Service, would go crazy over this. Chana suddenly called her a devil, saying her smile was creepy and gave her the chills. The girl dramatically clutched her forehead, asking what was so great about her husband that she was still thinking about him. To her surprise, Soryong said calmly that every moment with her husband was happy and meant everything to her. She gently squeezed her hand, saying that sometimes she could feel his presence even when she couldn't see him. Chana completely disagreed with her, saying it was best to be skeptical of everything and of everyone who tries to sweet-talk you. Soryong was too focused on their conversation to immediately notice a little girl waving at them. The little girl smiled at Soryong, handing her a bag of bracelets and complimenting her on her beauty. She thoughtfully asked Chana how she should react when someone calls her pretty. After being told to just send her off to play, she accepted the bracelet the girl had made and complimented it. Suddenly, she felt a strange atmosphere, as if danger was approaching, but she didn't know from where. Seemingly the only one to sense something was wrong, she grabbed her friend's hand and broke into a run. She clearly didn't understand why the girl was panicking like that, as if something had suddenly disgusted her. No matter how hard she tried to stop her, Soryong held her hand tightly and kept pulling her along. She briefly explained that she was fine, but her reaction was because she had a bad feeling about something. Shortly before this whole incident, he had ordered Chana to perform a deep hacking scan. Lee Woo-sung watched her every move, and when she said everything was checked, he gave his approval. Then he unexpectedly dropped a bombshell, saying he had overheard her helping Han, Soryong, investigate the guy who scammed her. Just as she said she had done nothing wrong, he retorted sharply that this was exactly what they were doing right now. The girl looked at her boss warily, as if pleading with him to explain what exactly he was implying. Lee Woo-sung laid it all out. They were protecting a major drug lord, preparing an escape route for him, and would even break into their own team members' homes if things got tricky. Then he asked her, "Doesn't that sound a bit messed up?" Lee Woo-sung suddenly became thoughtful, saying that any normal person would be terrified by all this. He recalled his conversation with Soryong, who hadn't even blinked when he explained what the job actually entailed. He had invited her on this operation to let her experience a world where morality was irrelevant, hoping she would quit the company on her own. In their marriage, she used to be a submissive and constantly anxious person, so he thought he could manipulate her as he pleased. He really thought he could manipulate her like before, but after clashing with her multiple times, his expectations were completely shattered. Lee Woo-sung realized that she was only gentle and kind to Kim Hyun. This suggestive question made Chana suddenly suspect that he might know everything. She was even more surprised when he suddenly asked if Soryong drank, given how calm she was after the fact. She became more convinced that he had sensed her sister's true motives. She couldn't accept that he might find out what made her act so fearlessly and selflessly. Chana knew that if he learned about her sister's grand plan, he would likely stop her at all costs. For now, he was still puzzled as to why Soryong would help scum and even make them elaborate breakfasts. He suddenly guessed that the bastard who ran off with all her money might not be a loser after all. After thinking for a second, Chana just said blankly that she never thought a man could stoop so low. Lee Woo-sung watched her with interest as she pointed out that Soryong had been with a complete madman. She suddenly clenched her fists, talking about how much her sister had suffered because of that bastard and how she wanted revenge. Then she finally unleashed all her anger, saying that if she ever met him, she would gut him like a fish and demanded that he stop asking any more questions. Chana added that this was the reason she brought Soryong to their company. She went on to add that the main reason was that there were many guys in the company she could network with. After that, she turned in surprise to look at Lee Woo-sung, who seemed to have finally realized it was her. The boss curtly told her she could go back to work now, which suddenly made the girl feel uneasy. She obviously didn't know that the bastard was standing right in front of her, and she reassured herself that nothing would happen. She immediately left her boss, wanting to make some spicy ramen with Soryong as soon as possible. Out of a simple desire to help her, she had no idea what kind of wrath she was about to unleash. The wrath of Lee Woo-sung. After that meeting, she went straight to the girl's place, where she enjoyed a delicious feast. Stuffed and happy, she thought about how good it felt to slurp down ramen after a long day's work. Chana answered the girl's question about why the other agents hadn't returned yet, then asked about her relationship with Woo-sung. Soryong froze, surprised, trying to figure out the best way to answer the question, given their tense relationship. Chana suddenly changed the subject, thinking that her little sister couldn't possibly have done anything to that bastard, and that they probably didn't even know each other. She said she would wash all the dishes, so Soryong could get some rest and relax. After she finished speaking, Soryong left the house, feeling a pang of anxiety after Chana had put her trust in her. To her surprise, she suddenly smelled a perfume on the stair landing, which made her even more suspicious. She immediately compared the scent, realizing that none of their agents used a similar perfume. Her suspicions were confirmed when she discovered the pool of blood on the floor. The girl couldn't suppress her fear when she saw the blood-soaked body right in their hallway. Her eyes quickly scanned the person's body, feeling that the killer might still be nearby. Then her gaze locked onto a slightly ajar door at the end of the hall, and she decided to check it out as quickly as possible. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw another bloody corpse inside, as if a complete massacre had taken place. Soryong tried to clear her head and figure out what had happened while everyone else was away. The girl immediately noticed there were no signs of struggle, no resistance, and the attacks were aimed at vital spots. Wondering who could have caught them off guard so early, Soryong immediately started to worry about her friend Chana. She retraced her steps as fast as she could, only to slip on the blood and hit her hip hard on the floor with a loud thud. Suddenly, she checked the body in horror and saw an earpiece in his ear, the kind that connected the agents to Lee Woo-sung. She was afraid to touch the body, but she knew she had no choice if she wanted to live. She silently prayed she could get through, telling him with a lump in her throat that everyone there was dead. Soryong tried to calmly report that someone had died there, but every word was a struggle. It seemed she had finally reached Lee Woo-sung, who slammed on the gas pedal. Hearing his voice on the other end, she managed to say that all the staff on these floors were dead. Lee Woo-sung told her to calm down, and she then said that everyone was dead without any bloodstains or signs of a fight. Finally, she added that she smelled a strong perfume and that the killer might still be in the hotel, which meant Chana was in danger. So Ryan couldn't suppress the fear that enveloped her when he stated that in this situation, Ho Chana was most likely already dead. He calmly added that she would be killed soon too, as they wouldn't leave any witnesses and she wouldn't be able to fight back. Lee Woo-sung demanded she pull herself together, take a gun from one of the guys, and hold out for as long as she could. Soryong barely managed to reach for the gun and quickly added that she had already found a car. She couldn't hide her horror when he coldly told her to abandon Ho Chana and get out of there immediately. The girl couldn't believe that to save her own life, she had to abandon the friend who had done so much for her. Lee Woo-sung insisted that she follow his orders, as there was no time for hesitation in this situation. He repeated that she should abandon Chana and leave the hotel, and she immediately realized it was all his command. Suddenly, she raised the gun, feeling her guilt fade away, replaced by something new. Soryong suddenly looked up in confusion, as if not understanding where these feelings were coming from. She unexpectedly saw a vision of her beloved husband in front of her, looking at her with a gentle, calm smile. For some reason, she felt that these orders weren't coming from Lee Woo-sung, but from her husband, whom she never thought to disobey. Finally, she made up her mind, gritting her teeth and promising that she would not abandon Ho-chana no matter what. Lee Woo-sung was stunned when she yelled that she wouldn't abandon her, and that she would tell her husband that these were her feelings and her choice. She rushed towards the exit, still rambling that she couldn't abandon anyone, not even Chana. For some reason, she again became obsessed with what earth-shattering reason Kim Hyun had for leaving her. After telling Lee Woo-sung that she would be the first to survive this madness, she returned to the kitchen, back to Chana. She scanned everything, looking for any sign of approaching danger. Her gaze locked onto a small pool of blood under the kitchen seating. In that instant, she was overwhelmed with fear, and these fears were confirmed when she approached the table. To her horror, she saw a huge gash on her friend's throat, yet she was still struggling to survive. Despite the excruciating pain, she was trying to hold on to a sliver of consciousness. She pleaded for help from Soryong, who leaned down, racking her brain for a way to save her friend's life. The girl had just told Lee Woo-sung that her throat was slit, Chana was in bad shape, and the bleeding wouldn't stop. She immediately answered her boss, saying they were in the main kitchen now. The guy told her to press down hard on the girl's throat with her hand and not let go, or she would die. He speculated that she was likely the main target, and that their mistake was not realizing she was a key specialist from North Korea. It seemed they had been tracking the hacker since she left the country, which allowed them to plan everything perfectly. He also said this might just be the beginning, as they had left her alive so that they could take the body later. Soryong couldn't believe they would torture Chana like that in order to recruit or interrogate her. Just as he mentioned that mercenaries were coming, she heard the approaching click-clack of high heels. The girl freed one hand and listened carefully to the person approaching outside the room. Soryong tried to stay calm and hinted to Lee Woo-sung that the killer themselves was approaching. She also said they would probably find her soon and that she needed to do something quickly. The boss just told her to load the gun, pull the slide, and get ready to aim. He said he was almost there and told her not to panic and to fire 2 more shots if she missed. He added that even if he died, he wanted to get 1 shot off just to see the bastard's face. After that, all she could think about was how to handle this with only one hand occupied. Seeing Chana's pained and twisted face, she promised herself that she would help her this time. She thought that if the killer came back, she would figure something out, and so she followed her boss's orders. She held the gun with her teeth, praying in her heart that she could succeed and operate the weapon properly. Her heart pounded faster as she heard the footsteps of the potential killer. Just as she reached the door, Lee Woo-sung immediately told her not to move. She was supposed to pull the trigger immediately, but she froze completely upon seeing that the killer was a woman. After her boss yelled, she snapped back to reality and tried to shoot, but the gun slipped from her hand. Luckily, the gun fell heavily to the floor and slid right to the feet of the enemy she was supposed to shoot. Her killer grinned like a shark, staring straight at her, sending a chill down her spine. Lee Woo-sung immediately sensed something was wrong and turned to her, waiting for an answer. He yelled at her to say something, anything, but she remained silent, feeling death closing in. The moment the earpiece popped out, the woman crushed it with her heel, cutting off all communication. A knife flashed in her hand, dripping with the blood of all the people she had harmed that day. Soryong kept a tight grip on Chana's throat no matter what, watching the woman slowly approach them. She immediately calculated her odds, knowing she absolutely could not let go of Chana's throat or she would be a goner. She immediately made eye contact with the killer, and the way they looked at them sent a wave of pure terror through her. It was then that she put the clues together. The agents were all dead without even putting up a fight, which was key. The strong scent of perfume also rang an alarm bell, and it seemed to be coming from this woman. She immediately thought of the streetwalkers who lured tourists in small tank tops and shorts. Suddenly, she realized that, even after years of being blind, her survival instincts had become so sharp. She moved so quickly and instinctively that before the killer could even react, she had already raised the gun. So Ryan cursed in disgust, spat at him, and told him he was no woman, just some guy dressed as one for some reason. She still didn't pull the trigger, staring at the man who had been hunting them while disguised as a prostitute. Her words seemed to excite him, and he grinned, brandishing his knife with a hungry look in his eyes. He didn't even get a chance to act on it, as Soryong, with all her might, landed a blow right to his groin, confirming her theory. Damn, her strike must have packed a punch, because the assassin collapsed to the ground, trying to endure the excruciating pain. Seizing the opportunity, Soryong used all her strength to load the pistol and took aim, ready for revenge. Then she fired without hesitation, hitting the bastard who had caused so much trouble. Soryong's shot was a direct hit, and the killer's eyes rolled back as he bid farewell to the world. Realizing she had finally dealt with the threat, the girl smirked, muttering to herself that this gun was a real pain. Finally, day broke, and the rest of the team arrived at the hotel, including Lee Woo-sung. They were shocked to find them still in the same spot, where Soryong had passed out after firing the first shot. Lee Woo-sung quickly noticed that, even in her sleep, she still hadn't let go of her friend's throat. Another person pointed out that it was a guy dressed as a woman, as his private parts were completely destroyed. Lee Woo-sung was stunned when his agent suggested that Soryong might be responsible for this. He glanced back at the girl, still not believing she was capable of all this, considering how calm she usually was. All he saw was the pure and gentle woman who once looked at him the way she looked at her beloved husband. It was only then that he understood that neither he nor his past self had ever seen this stranger she had become. After what happened last night, the girl ended up in a hospital room, with Lee Woo-sung sitting right beside her. To his surprise, the moment Soryong opened her eyes, she jumped up in shock, checking her body. He smirked, clenching his fist, thinking she must be in a lot of pain, and said she deserved it. The guy added that he had stayed here just to see her pained and twisted face. Soryong was clearly angry at his attitude and demanded he explain why he was talking like that. He added that although her arm was basically useless, she deserved credit for not dying and should answer his questions. Just as he finished saying she could ask anything, she remembered her friend who had been in so much pain. She still couldn't forget the look on the girl's face when she found her in a pool of blood on the floor. Lu Xing seemed to read her mind, saying that Ho-chan was currently in the intensive care unit. The team leader rubbed his head, saying with a weary look that although she was alive, she was still in a coma and in very bad shape. They performed emergency surgery on the spot, but the blood loss was far more severe than expected. Unfortunately, her heart even stopped at one point, and she had already hovered on the brink of death twice, her life hanging by a thread. When he said she wouldn't wake up for another week, Han Soryong looked away in surprise. He said that with an injury like that, it would be difficult for her to handle work until she recovered, and then suggested calling her husband. His words were full of mockery, and she wanted to lash out at him, but he went on to say that her husband wasn't even in her contact list. Afterwards, Li Wuxing prepared to leave and said with a sneer that he doubted if that man was even her real husband. His words were so arrogant that Han Soryong was speechless for a moment. She averted her gaze and said that if he came to rip her apart, he had succeeded and he could leave now. Before she could even say goodbye, he suddenly asked what the hell she had shoved in her mouth to injure her gums like that. Han Soryong pensively touched her injured lips, remembering what had caused the wound. She said her hands weren't free to prepare the gun, so she decided to try and do something with her mouth, anything at all. It seemed her words about the critical situation and the method she used made the veins on his face bulge with anger. He approached her angrily, saying what would have happened if a rookie had loaded the gun incorrectly. Pointing to his own mouth, he said that in that case, her mouth would have been blown to smithereens. To his surprise, Han Soryong wasn't scared at all, saying that since nothing blew up, everything was fine. Hearing this, he suddenly cracked a smile, ruffled her hair, and asked if her husband knew what she was really like. He said she was ignorant, stubborn, and completely insane, despite her pretense of being righteous and smart. Han Soryong remained indifferent to his words, her face expressionless. After a moment, She stated calmly that her husband definitely didn't know this side of her. Then she added that her husband only needed to see her face and that he didn't need to know the details. She also said that she didn't jump out to save Ho-chan because she was some kind of saint, but because she wanted to catch her husband. Han Soryong wanted to prove that both he and her husband were wrong, and that people can't just be thrown away so easily. In any case, after speaking, she lowered her head and swore that it was all calculated and had nothing to do with nobility. Her words seemed to completely contradict his impression of her, leaving him utterly speechless. He just stood by the bed, lost in thought, until she started to thank him for his help. She was about to say that she would have died without him and couldn't have done it alone, but Li Wuxing cut her off. He suddenly leaned in close to her and said that he was the one who should be thanking her, because now he could finally get rid of her. He said he could do this because she had refused to obey orders, and then he unexpectedly grabbed her by the throat. Li Wuxing looked directly into her eyes and said that she, a civilian, had shot and killed a person. He added that even if the company helped cover it up, she would never be able to forget what she had done. The team leader wanted her to resign voluntarily and began saying she should go back to her old life. As he spoke, he forcefully insisted that she do so, using his last bit of goodwill. As parting words, he said he saw no point in someone like her, as he needed the kind of guys who could pull out and betray without hesitation. He also said that looking at Han Soryong, who only spoke empty words, made him sick. After speaking, he paused, as if he wanted to trip her up and make her change her mind no matter what. So he suddenly forced a fake smile and suggested that if she understood him correctly, they should never see each other again. A few days after that conversation, Han Soryong was still in the hospital recovering from her injuries. Still in shock about being fired, she decided to visit Ho-chan. Standing by her injured friend's bedside, she softly told her that she had been fired. Han Soryong knew she wouldn't get a response, but she still wanted to share it with the person who had always supported her. Suddenly, an older man appeared behind her, saying that after everything she had been through, there was still a fire in her eyes. She immediately became wary and asked who he was, not understanding why he was talking to her. The man, leaning on an eagle-headed cane, said that he owed her a huge favor. Then, with a humble smile, he introduced himself as the CEO of Blast, the company she worked for. He said his name was Kong Taegon, and the girl, still dumbfounded, just stood there. The man sat down on the sofa and said that he was just on his way to the hospital to see her, but she had saved him the trouble. Han Soryong couldn't believe the CEO himself would say such a thing, thanking her for saving Ho-chan. She listened intently to his every word as he spoke of how much effort it took to secure such a valuable asset for the company. He added that he shuddered at the thought of her being killed by an assassin in Thailand, which would have been a huge loss for him. Kong Taegon continued, saying they couldn't have closed the deal without her, and then asked if Li Wuxing had told her to abandon Ho-chan. This immediately made her recall that difficult moment at the hotel when he first ordered her to leave Ho-chan and save herself. Even she couldn't figure out why he would have her abandon someone so important to the company. Even though he had said she was useless, he had still chosen to save her instead of Ho-chan. Noticing her confusion, the CEO said he was here to express his gratitude. He smiled and assured her that although the company would pay compensation, he still wanted to thank her personally. A week later, Li Wuxing was on a new mission in Nigeria, where they were at a police training camp. He was relaxing on a deck chair, acting as if nothing had happened, and watching how gloomy the sky was. The guy chanced upon a small cloud that looked like an owl with huge eyes. He kept staring at the cloud, not even realizing he was still thinking about that damn owl until now. He was annoyed with himself for being so hung up on that clingy little brat until someone called out to him. The annoyed agent turned to his subordinate, fuming as he asked if he had seen the new directive. When he heard that the commander didn't care, he handed him a neatly printed copy, demanding he read it at once. Li Wuxing quickly scanned the main points, wanting to talk about this nonsense even less. He casually picked up his glass and decided to get more ice, which annoyed the agent even more. The commander suddenly said that unless Jean Ho-jae started behaving, he wouldn't even consider helping him with anything. To his greater surprise, Ki Taemin appeared behind him and snatched the document from his hand. He read the order in shock a basic training program for a new recruit joining the Blast organization. What shocked them most was that they were being asked to serve as instructors as soon as they returned. Everyone present was pissed off, considering their pay, to be asked to do this kind of crap in a foreign country. Li Wuxing stretched out of boredom and said that because Ho Chan was dead, their 6-month schedule was also ruined. Jin Ho Jae was so caught off guard by this that he even gasped, surprised that she was already dead. But Ki Taemin immediately interjected, saying that Ho Chan was still alive, a fact their commander seemed to have forgotten. The commander just said boredly that she had better recover quickly so the team could get back to work. The second man continued reading the document, saying they were authorized to recruit a replacement for the Special Operations Unit themselves. Li Wuxing listened with boredom as they talked about how they had recruited rookies before, but they all quit because of Ki Taemin. He used to nitpick everything and was a clean freak, so the rookies would surely quit from being unable to handle the stress. Ki Taemin immediately retorted, reminding him how he made the rookies chug cases of alcohol on the first day before stuffing them into their beds. They immediately started hurling insults at each other, talking about hazing rookies and how brotherhood is built through pain. It seemed Li Wuxing couldn't take their nonsense anymore and told them to come back after they had recruited the new guy. Just as he turned away, Jin Ho Jae asked at the last second which rookie he wanted. It seemed even the commander himself wasn't entirely sure who to choose, although he already had someone in mind. He suddenly became very pensive and started rambling about the kind of person he wanted to pick. Li Wuxing looked at a cloud and said with a smile that the main thing for him was that his eyes never had to see this new recruit. The next day, Han Soryong received a document about Blast's 10-week basic training for new recruits. She looked at the form, completely unable to understand why she was being given such an opportunity. A short while ago, the CEO had announced that they were in dire need of female agents, who were hard to find, and besides, he said that this time he had really found something interesting that could help their company. While talking to Han Soryong about what she wanted, he found out she wanted to kidnap the deputy director of NRIS. She didn't give a clear reason, only saying that she wanted to do something very out of line. He fell into thought when she asked if a reason was necessary and added that she wanted it as a reward. Although he refused her, thinking it was too risky, he still said she was the best person for an operation. It was after that call that she was given the chance to start the training she had dreamed of. Staying in the hospital, she reread the document over and over, as if she still couldn't make up her mind. She was tired of thinking about why she was involved in all this, as if the director wanted her to act alone. Han Soryong gazed at the clouds, wondering if she could get what she wanted if she became an agent. While lost in thought, she happened to notice 2 female students, one of whom was on crutches. The scene reminded her of some rather tough times she had also gone through during her school days. She had been a gymnastics prodigy until a life-changing event got her expelled from the academy. The passing students looked at her in shock, wondering why she had come back after being expelled. They were suddenly reminded of Chu Di-yoon, who was notorious for constantly bullying others. She had once been seriously injured because of Han Soryong. Han Soryong had performed a forbidden move, completely baiting her. She felt she had no choice but to imitate it to win, but it backfired. She attempted the move, lost her balance, fell, and was out of the competition for good. Rumor had it that her leg was shattered, unlike Han Soryong, who had performed the move perfectly. The girls couldn't understand why it was Han Soryong's fault when Di-yoon herself had chosen to attempt the dangerous move. What they didn't know was how much Han Soryong herself hated the sport, which had strict limits on an athlete's power. So she felt it would be more fun outside the mat, which was why she made her choice. Then, she had a sudden flashback to the hospital when Li Wuxing asked if she remembered killing someone. She understood now that she didn't need to break free. She needed a new arena where anything could explode and be twisted without limits. It seemed Han Soryong had always been a weirdo who could find beauty in bloody reality. She was getting into it, and just as she read that they needed someone with a bad attitude who was dissatisfied with society, she smiled and said that was her. She was surprised that she wanted to help because in the arena, no one would notice you. She completely projected this onto her past sports career when she had to hold onto that bar all by herself. She realized she had to fill the stage with her own power and then walked forward with confidence, finally, finding herself among the recruits chosen for basic training, where everything started from scratch. It seemed the bully she had offended while working at the company was also there. She listened carefully to the information provided by the speaker at the meeting and realized she was wrong. She looked straight ahead, thinking that this was just the beginning for her. To her surprise, the burly guy next to her asked what she was doing here since she had just quit. He decided to mock her openly, asking if she was here to apply as a dishwasher among the trainees. Soryong thoughtfully lowered her gaze and said that although she was indeed better at cooking, things didn't always go as planned. All the men around her tensed up when she said, especially when someone dies. The big guy was taken aback by her words, as he clearly didn't know what she had been through recently. He demanded she get out of his sight and scram, but she told him to stop pretending and stop attracting attention. She said with full confidence that she was no longer in a position to put up with his crap. He was surprised when she mentioned his lust-filled motives and suggested they stop pretending to know each other and be friends. The person she was talking to was so low class that her words immediately turned him on, after which he called her psycho. Before she could answer, they finally heard the commander's booming voice. He calmly introduced himself, saying he was the head of the special security team in charge of basic training. Li Wuxing casually mentioned that their team of instructors would do everything to train them. He ran through the plan in his head and announced that the basic training program would take place at a private camp for 10 weeks. The commander was about to continue when he spotted her, the one girl he least wanted to see here. The other agents couldn't understand why he had suddenly shut up, as if he had seen something very bad. Nevertheless, his eyes were glued to Soryong and the soldier who was constantly fiddling with his fly. Just the sight of those two together made the veins on his face pop, his whole body burning with rage at the guy's actions. He continued his speech, promising that those who completed the full basic training course would have the right to join the team. The moment he finished speaking, he grabbed Soryong's arm, dragged her aside, and barked that she was not getting on that bus. He didn't react to her demand to let go, simply telling her he never wanted to see her again. It seemed Li Wuxing was unaware of her trump card until she threatened to call the CEO. She told him that although he had fired her on the spot, Kong Taegon had actually rewarded her for what she did. She finished by saying that if he wanted to fire her again, he would have to talk to the CEO first. It seemed only after this threat did Li Wuxing finally start to consider her words and calm down. He reminded her that he was the one who recruited people here, not the director, and that during training, he was the one who decided who gets eliminated. Li Wuxing added that even men get weeded out in these trainings, so she definitely wouldn't last and shouldn't be here at all. To his surprise, Soryong said that whether she was eliminated or stayed on in disgrace was her own decision to make, so he had no right to judge. At that moment, Li Wuxing looked away thoughtfully and asked if her stubbornness had something to do with the husband she mentioned. She immediately shot back, asking if things would be clearer for him if she said yes. She asked him point blank how he planned to stop a woman who would do anything to catch her runaway husband. Then, as a parting shot, she said her pride couldn't be hurt because without her husband, nothing could hurt her. Soryong told him to be as harsh with her in training as he was with everyone else, but he just asked if she was driven by revenge or obsession. It seemed that for the first time, Soryong truly noticed the change in his expression and was surprised at how shaken he looked. She suddenly fell into thought, realizing that neither revenge nor obsession could be explained in a few words. Thinking of her husband, she felt resentment, attachment, love, and hate, as if any of those emotions could be pinned on him. She was suffering from this mix of conflicting emotions and didn't even know how to describe it all. Afterward, Soryong gave a faint, gentle smile and simply replied that she was driven by a mix of all those things. At that moment, Li Wuxing watched her intently, eagerly catching every emotion of this person who longed for his disguised identity. He decided to make one last attempt to somehow persuade her to give up this path in life and spoke to her harshly. Li Wuxing quickly closed the distance between himself and the stubborn girl on purpose. He leaned in close to the potential recruit and told her he was going to reveal the truth to her. He kept looking directly into her eyes while she tried to figure out what on earth he was trying to say. He suddenly started saying that when you're in this game, you start to see certain things happening around you. Li Wuxing gave an example, calling love a form of psychological manipulation that is used everywhere. He called it a way to make a person not feel lonely, to gain recognition, and to make them look only at you. Han Soryong suddenly felt that his words somehow fit her situation and described her feelings for her husband in a way. Li Wuxing was describing how he felt while on this mission, and she was completely unaware of it. He continued, saying that if you also create the feeling that they are loved, a person can easily mistake it for true love. Han Soryong felt a sting when he told her not to let her brain deceive her, as she might just be in love with a con artist's trick. He told her that this bastard probably wasn't thinking about her at all, and if she wanted revenge, she should get out of here and live a good life. To his surprise, Han Soryong suddenly declared that for her, true revenge wasn't living well herself, but him not living well. She also added that even if everything he said was true, she wanted to hear it from her husband's own mouth. In the end, Li Wuxing gave up trying to persuade her and left her alone to attend the basic training. In the empty barracks, she couldn't help but think that she should have held her tongue that day and not been so rude. She had called her commander a bastard, and now she regretted saying it, especially considering he was trying to find ways to kick her out. Her thoughts were involuntarily interrupted by the shouts of another recruit, who was yelling about how anyone could live in the same room with a woman. It was that same jerk who pointed at her and said he was here to train, not to sleep in the same room with some chick. He kept trying to annoy her, acting rude and disrespectful like a little kid who's afraid to show interest. The other recruits chimed in, saying she should get a separate room because she just didn't fit in here. Han Soryong just listened to them argue in silence, then met the gaze of the gloating jerk who had started it all. Right after, a guy suddenly walked up to her and asked if she could fight and where she was from. Before she could answer, a big guy rushed over, called him an idiot, and said she used to be a maid at their company. He was basically trying to remind him that she was the youngest and hottest of all the maids. Han Soryong just watched him with a blank face as the guy suddenly and arrogantly called her the one who had seduced him. They kept telling her to leave and not cause trouble, even offering to give up their shower time for her. Without them noticing, Li Wuxing appeared at the door, staring daggers at the troublemaker, Song Wook-chan. He kept burning holes through the angry troublemakers with his eyes, questioning what all the noise was about. When the man started saying he didn't want to share a room with a woman, another one asked if he was afraid he'd be tempted. After that, he approached them and asked where on earth they found these pea-brained idiots who acted like children. He suddenly asked what they would do if a woman joined the team, then accused them of not seeing her as just another teammate. Then he leaned in close to Han Soryong like a predator and asked with a smile what she wanted, knowing full well it was a loaded question. She just stared at him while he wondered if a separate room, as the others suggested, would solve the problem. Afterward, he pointed to himself and said they had no spare rooms, so she would have to stay with the instructors. Unexpectedly, she just slapped his hand away and replied coldly that she didn't need any special treatment. He couldn't believe his ears when she bluntly told him not to go easy on her just because of the changing issue. He tried to explain that she would see them changing, but she just threw his words back at him, saying it wasn't a problem, parroting his line about how not seeing a colleague as a colleague was a problem with one's intelligence capabilities. After saying all that, Han Soryong declared that she would sleep, shower, and train with them, even if she was exhausted to the point of breathlessness. Her words sounded so resolute that Li Wuxing couldn't even tell if he felt admiration or pure fear. He ended up throwing a knife at her, saying her main mission was just to survive this hell. He announced that if they were harassed or sexually assaulted, they should file a report first before telling him. As he turned to leave, he added one last thing, that he would immediately expel anyone found to be a culprit. It seemed his words hit Sun Wook-chan hard, as the guy kept his head down, covering his private parts. Seeing no objections, Li Wuxing ordered them to clean up the mess and then pack their bags. Soryong didn't react to his words until he said something that finally piqued her interest. He suddenly said that if anyone decided to quit, they just had to ring the bell on the training ground and walk away. The commander concluded by saying they weren't conscripts with buzz cuts, and no one would punish them for running away. When he looked directly at her and said he couldn't keep people like that, the girl tensed up. He smiled and repeated that he couldn't force the special few who would do anything for their future stay. After that conversation, night fell, and the team members slept like logs in their barracks. completely unaware of any trouble. But Soryong was sleeping restlessly, and she happened to notice someone pushing the door ajar. She barely opened her eyes to see the intruder, but what she saw terrified her. She noticed something suspicious, a smoke grenade lying on the floor as if someone had deliberately thrown it in. She was about to scream, but the guy who threw the smoke grenade interrupted her, asking what the big deal was. Even with the gas mask on, she recognized him. It was her commander, and he was practically mocking her. She glared at him while he just stared at her, asking if they really thought they could get a peaceful night's sleep. Then he shoved her back onto the canvas bed, waiting for the gas from the smoke grenade to knock her out. When they woke up again, they found themselves tied up on an inflatable boat, bobbing in the middle of the ocean. Soryong glared at the instructor, who smirked and said, "Looks like you're awake now." Lee Mushin ripped the masks off everyone one by one, reminding them that he had promised they wouldn't get any sleep. As they were officially informed that basic training had begun, Soryong immediately felt the ropes cutting painfully into her wrists and ankles. Lee Mushin grinned, told them to begin, and then approached the first recruit, pinning him against the side of the boat with his foot. The mission was simple: stay afloat, even with their hands and feet tied. Soryong couldn't believe her eyes as he started pushing the recruits one by one into the icy water. Sun Wookchan tried to beg the instructor for mercy, but he was the next to go straight into the water. Lee Mushin was clearly enjoying himself, throwing the recruits into the water one after another, not at all concerned if they would drown. He kept doing this until only he and Soryong were left on the boat, and she watched in horror as the others struggled in the water. Finally, he gave her a smug look and told her that there was no ringing a bell to quit out here. He was clearly enjoying the crazed look in her eyes, while she cursed him in her mind for everything he was doing. He grabbed her jacket, pushed her head into the water, and asked if she wanted to kick him in the groin. Lee Mushin leaned over her with a smug look, saying that if she didn't want to do that, she could slap him. As the others struggled and cried for help in the water, he kept saying that if she just hit him, he would let her go. To his surprise, she just glared at him fiercely and asked if she could spit on him instead. She retorted angrily that if he was going to give up, he'd better let go now, because she wouldn't. He suddenly cursed her, calling her a bitch, and said her husband would have felt cheated if he'd found out what she was like before they got married. She retorted that her husband was hiding more, so they could call the whole thing a marriage of convenience. She was about to point out that she was the victim in this situation, but he instantly let her go. Panicked, Soryong realized she was falling into the water, feeling a real threat to her life. The moment she hit the water with a splash, the bone-chilling seawater enveloped her, freezing her to the core. Watching the instructor's face disappear, the man who had just signed her death warrant, she secretly imagined her husband's face. Then the girl shot to the surface, coughing and feeling like she was fighting for her life. Now trapped in the water with the rest of them, Soryong tried to shout at him, but he paid no attention. Finally, Lee Mushin gave an impatient look to the girl who questioned if he was ever going to get them out. Her body trembling from the cold, she finally snapped, saying they would all freeze to death at this rate. The soldiers around her immediately agreed and started demanding to be pulled up, but the commander remained completely unmoved. He suddenly said thoughtfully that there would be accidents in training, even fatal ones, which made everyone even more uneasy. He seemed to be enjoying himself, then said dreamily that the sun would rise in 10 minutes. Soryong couldn't believe what kind of bastard he was, so cheerfully suggesting they watch the sunrise. When he asked if she wanted to hit him, she snarled back that she wanted to tear him to pieces right now. Lee Mushin grinned like an idiot and said that while a little roughhousing was fine, biting was not allowed. They're hated. Instructor looked damn smug at that moment, and the people around him gritted their teeth in anger. Soryong thought their commander was a complete and utter bastard and finally saw the first rays of sunlight breaking through. It wasn't until after sunrise that Lee Mushin finally pulled the last team member onto the boat, and then they started heading back. The team members were shivering from the cold, still tied up, and increasingly felt like they were going to freeze to death. Judging by the pained expression on Soryong's face, she seemed to feel the same way. At first, she sat a little away from the others, but they suggested she move closer for warmth. She couldn't help but feel like a penguin being huddled by its companions to keep from freezing. After thinking for a moment, she found a spot among the others, while still keeping an eye on the commander. Only then did the team members finally feel the chill begin to subside, albeit very slowly. Lee Mushin was completely mocking them, saying that at this rate, they would soon have to strip each other naked. He must have felt Han Seoryong's death glare and decided to punish her. Since he was driving the boat, he deliberately sped up, causing the huddled team members to slide around the deck and fall all over each other. The guy was clearly enjoying himself, whistling all the way back to the barracks. Finally, after a while, they reached the shore, and he announced with a grin that they wouldn't be going back to the barracks unless they untied themselves. He told them to hurry up if they didn't want to become human popsicles. Soryong stared blankly as the soldiers, numb from the cold, frantically tried to untie their ropes. Realizing this wasn't going to work and that no one would help her, she clenched her fists and prepared to act. Despite the pain in her back, she still decided to perform a move that most people couldn't even accomplish. The others around her were stunned by what she was about to do, as the move was anatomically impossible. I swear, even Li Muxin almost whistled when he saw the move she was about to make. Everyone around her marveled at how smoothly she moved her arms to her front, completely ignoring the pain in her hands and shoulders. As soon as the entire reserve team was free, they headed straight for the hot showers. They were all busy talking about the former maid, calling her a total monster. Standing at the entrance to the showers, she heard them say they would be happy to pack her up and send her home if her shoulder was dislocated. One of them said it would be a shame if she left. After all, she had a pretty face and was easy on the eyes. Soryong seemed unresponsive to their words, just calmly waiting for her turn to finally warm up. Behind her, Li Muxin impatiently threw a towel at her, asking if she wanted to freeze to death. Their tense gazes met, after which he demanded she follow him. Soryong was filled with obvious distrust at his offer, still not knowing what he was up to. He dragged her into a room and told her that from now on, this was the only shower she could use. Just as she asked where this was, he grinned and said it was his place. Her reaction clearly amused him. Then he reached out and said she was in no position to be picky. In one motion, Li Muxin pulled her closer, said he didn't think so, and turned on the water. He held her shoulders tightly, letting the hot water wash over her from head to toe. It brought real relief. Feeling the pleasant warmth, she asked what he was doing, and he replied that he was helping her relax. He said her body was too tense, but she immediately shot back, asking what business it was of his. Li Muxin clearly didn't like her tone after he had been so kind, but he restrained himself from answering. He suddenly asked how much she had hidden from her husband, then said he needed to know his subordinates completely. Soryong shared honestly that she had hidden a lot, because she thought her kind, good husband would run away if he really knew her. The girl had just admitted that she could kill someone without batting an eye, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. Knowing what a wonderful person her husband was, she was certain he would run away immediately once he found out her true nature. She kept telling herself that playing the good girl would keep him, just like before. Then, with this strange smile, Soryong blurted out that this was why she wanted to be the perfect wife and be with him forever. It was truly shocking. The water suddenly stopped, and standing there was none other than Commander Li Muxin. He thought to himself that her husband was quite a match for her, but she could barely comprehend the idea. A part of her didn't even want to think about it, let alone admit that such a thing could happen. She didn't even know why she had confessed all this to Li Muxin, a man she truly despised. Soryong suddenly realized that if she admitted it, all those moments she had once thought were love would instantly become lies. After that, she backed away from the commander, demanding that he swear not to breathe a word of this conversation to anyone. Then, she suddenly smiled and said that if he caught her husband, he should tell him that she was very shy and submissive. Li Muxin wanted to ask why he should do that, but she just said that he was the one who brought it up in the first place. He bluntly said it was strange and reminded her that she had said she would get revenge on her husband if she caught him. To his surprise, she just said calmly that she would definitely get her revenge by making him fulfill his duties as a husband. Despite the somewhat absurd nature of her words, Li Muxin kept staring at her. Soryong suddenly said that she still loved him, and even if it wasn't love for him, he still wouldn't refuse to sleep with her. After saying that, she instinctively reached for the shower head, which made her commander even more nervous. She suddenly gave him a threatening look and said she just needed to get her husband back no matter what, whether for revenge or passion. Soryong turned on the water, aimed the shower head at the instructor, and told him he would regret it if anything went wrong. It seemed Li Muxin was captivated by this side of her, not even reacting to the water splashing all over his face. He just calmly closed his eyes, wiped his face with his hand, and kept his eyes fixed on his trainee. After that, the girl turned off the water and coldly told him that she could be bad too. The next day was the start of the first week of official training for the Shockwave unit, kicking off on the athletic field. Lee Mu-shin pushed the soldiers to their limits with various physical exercises, including pull-ups. He smugly announced that anyone who missed the whistle would get no lunch, but Soryong kept challenging herself. Her body trembled with every move she made, while the instructor watched her closely. He suddenly asked mockingly if she liked to sing, dragging out the time for the exercise even longer. She cursed him in her mind when he said he would blow the whistle if she motivated him with a song. The moment he mentioned that her comrades would soon be starving, she immediately felt their pleading gazes. With shame and anger, Soryong still pleased him with her tired singing voice, singing about the beautiful land and clear mountains and rivers. I swear, everyone froze in fear when her song turned into a direct mockery of the harsh instructors. Even the other agents couldn't hide their concern about what Lee Mu-shin would do to her. He just glared at the insolent recruit, not even bothering to listen to the words of her song. Finally, sunset marked the end of the first day of training. Soryong wearily massaged her sore wrists, realizing that once again, for what felt like the millionth time, she had missed lunch. Before she knew it, the instructor was standing in front of her, asking if she was on steroids. He leaned in closer and said that if he found out she was like this because of drugs, things would be much easier to understand. Before she could get a word out, he cut her off, saying she had changed a lot since they first met, becoming much more dangerous. He declared, like a father, that his theory was that she was creating many problems she herself was unaware of. Soryong immediately retorted that she didn't understand why her successfully completing the training was a problem for him. It seemed Lee Mu-shin was more perplexed by the girl's insane stamina and wildness than he had expected. He suddenly grabbed her wrist and told her that if she wasn't eliminated, she would become a problem for him in the future. Then he examined her hand, saying that with such a thin wrist, it was impossible for her to hold onto that bar without drugs. He met her gaze when she said she did have something to rely on. Although she didn't want to talk about it, she looked away and said she had nothing to fear, and had been prone to acting impulsively since she was a child. She never cared about her own pain or hurting others, except for her husband. She surprised him by suddenly saying she had trained in gymnastics like this since she was a child, so this bit of training was nothing to her. Soryong realized she always talked too much in front of this man, unable to control her mouth. The next second, that familiar feeling she once called a conditioned reflex suddenly washed over her. She snatched her hand back and looked around, trying to catch the same scent that was seared into her memory. The girl carefully sized up the man, whose scent hit her strongly, just like her husband's. When this man stood behind Lee Mu-shin, she clearly saw the shadow of Kim Hyun in him. She couldn't tell if he was real or a hallucination, but it all brought her back to a memory in an instant. She suddenly remembered a conversation with a vendor who had been talking about how reliable Soryong's husband was. They were out grocery shopping that day, and Kim Hyun was busy doing the same. The woman said he had broad shoulders and was handsome, then asked where she had found such a man. You should have seen her expression when Soryong just smiled dreamily and asked her to tell her more about him. She smiled brightly, pulled a stick closer to herself, and then said she also wanted to see what her husband looked like. The woman immediately gushed that he had monolids, a straight, high nose, and looked like an athlete. Soryong tried to picture her husband in her mind, trying to grasp every detail. Before she could process all the details, Kim Hyun walked over and told her he had bought everything on the list. He smiled at her, showed her the bags, and asked if she needed anything else. A few days after that incident, she was back in training with the rest of the team as usual. She sized up one of the team members, thinking that some things couldn't be disguised with cologne or hair conditioner. Suddenly, for some reason, she remembered the scent of her husband during the nights they spent together. She smelled a similar scent on this man, which completely caught his attention. She stopped in her tracks, trying to confirm her suspicions, a blush creeping up her face. Soryong knew it was impossible for an intelligence agent to be here, but she still decided to offer to wash his training clothes for him. She was already falling behind the group, but still tried to offer to handle his uniform. She tried to explain that she was good at laundry, but suddenly a man's hand covered her mouth. Lee Mu-shin covered her face, told her to speed up and run properly. He covered the girl's eyes and eagerly waved at the confused soldier, ordering him to keep going. When they were alone, he harshly reprimanded her for being absolutely crazy out here. He He said coldly that this was the second time he had caught Soldier Han Soryong checking out other men. She frowned when he said that if she was caught a third time, he might have to praise his soldier's knife skills. Finally, he snapped that he would not tolerate any flings, then charged forward, thinking she wouldn't see the middle finger behind his back, as she thought to herself, what could he do if he didn't tolerate it? To her shock, Li Mu-shin, as if he had eyes in the back of his head, rushed towards her. He saw right through her, making it clear with his eyes that she shouldn't pull such stunts. Right after that look, he flicked her forehead hard, as if punishing a child. He looked angry and became even more annoyed, directly asking her why she was drooling over an instructor like a dog. Soryong glared at him fiercely, demanding he explain exactly when and at whom she had been drooling. But Li Mu-shin just dismissed it, telling her to stop looking for a replacement for her husband, because it was impossible. After a tough day, the commander returned to his room and contacted a hacker to dig up more dirt on the girl. The hacker guessed he wanted to know about her relationship with the CEO and said he was impressed by the trip to Thailand. He also added that since then, the CEO had been looking at Owl's resume and even hired someone to do a background check on her. To his surprise, he noticed that the Shockwave company had been trying to increase the number of female bodyguards for a long time. They also recruited suitable candidates from all over and even trained them, all of which was recorded in their database. Whenever Director Kang Tae-gun went on business trips to Russia, he always took female bodyguards with him. What happened next was a mystery, as they left together, but he always returned alone, which was a bit suspicious. After that, Li Mu-shin rubbed his forehead and said that the foolish owl had gotten herself into very deep trouble. The hacker also said that there was no intelligence on Kang Tae-gun's activities in Russia, no travel records, nothing. Before hanging up, Li Mu-shin told him to report immediately as soon as there was any new information. But before he could hang up his headset, the hacker asked if it was true that Owl couldn't recognize him even up close. He wondered if maybe she just didn't recognize him because his face was different from Kim Hyun's. Li Mu-shin calmly confirmed it, saying that everything from his face to his head, and even his body odor, was fake. They even bulked up for this operation, changing the entire physique of his real body. He was surprised when the man suggested that maybe Owl only liked men who looked like Kim Hyun. This speculation seemed to make Li Mu-shin think even more deeply about the woman who was once his loyal and submissive wife. He was exhausted by this whole old operation and just wanted to forget it all as a nightmare. This man thought he could get rid of the woman just by changing his identity, but she had found him even here. The next day, all the team members gathered again at the location for the next test. The girl was supporting another team member, Duan Jiu, who was panicking badly about his body's reaction. It turned out he was so nervous that he had accidentally pooped his pants on the spot. Soryong tried to explain that it was just a mistake due to the sudden change in pressure and that no one saw, but he was still very upset. She couldn't let the only person ranked below her quit, as he was always at the bottom in all the tests. Realizing she had to find a way to help him relax and get through this moment of shame, Soryong gently touched his shoulder. She suddenly said to him very seriously that all kinds of excrement are valuable, and his was no exception. Soryong stated firmly that healthy digestion is nothing to be ashamed of and that he shouldn't run away from it. She asked him bluntly if he was going to quit over something so trivial, but the guy still felt very vulnerable. Meanwhile, on the other side of the pool, the commander was being asked if he found the girl sexy. Jin Hoji suddenly became very awkward, saying that she had been staring at him lately, and he confessed that she was the first woman to look at him with that burning gaze, as if she wanted to do something. The guy happily turned to the commander, guessing that he might have a girlfriend soon. Li Woo-sung was about to scold him, but he immediately promised not to worry, saying he would approach her gently. But his hopes were dashed when Li Woo-sung warned him that she had a husband. He unexpectedly suggested that if he didn't believe she loved her husband and couldn't live without him, he could try insulting her husband. The commander also warned him not to provoke her when she was holding a weapon, as she was quite paranoid. Jin Ho-jae still couldn't believe it, recalling her seductive gaze. But his words were cut short when Li Woo-sung glared at him and said that he wasn't the only one who found her sexy, so he'd better shut up. A moment later, the commander gathered all the trainees at the swimming pool, where the next training exercise would take place. He told them they had to make a makeshift flotation device, and then ordered everyone to take off their pants, starting with the instructors. It seemed he had specifically arranged this task because those around immediately started looking shyly at Han Su-rei-young. She immediately felt a sickening sense of humiliation and barely moved, as if she didn't know what to do. It seemed Lee Woo-sung noticed she was the only one still wearing her pants. He called out her name. The commander said sternly that he had no reason to accept someone who couldn't even save herself. He deliberately focused all the attention on her, wanted to see if she would break under the pressure. Soryong froze on the spot, while the other trainees burned her with their gazes as well. The commander sighed wearily and was about to say that they should postpone this stage due to the special circumstances, but she protested. The girl angrily rejected his decision, started moving her legs, and yanked off her pants. All the other team members immediately looked away, embarrassed for their teammate who was about to be in a predicament. It seemed that only under this unexpected pressure did she finally pull herself together and obey the order. Then she put her pants back on with a blank expression and looked straight at her persistent instructor. Their eyes met, and Lee Woo-sung caught a glimpse of hurt and shame in Soryong's eyes. In the end, they finished the training, left all their gear in the pool, and ended the day. Knowing that Soryong would be the last one to leave the pool, he deliberately ordered everyone to rush back to the barracks without looking back. Soryong took the opportunity to try and get out of the pool, but Lee Woo-sung immediately told her to stay put. She looked at him in confusion, not noticing the last team member walking past her from behind. And so, the two of them were left alone in the pool, engaged in a strange, silent eye contact. After a brief silence, she climbed out of the pool to thank him, but questioned whether his concern was genuine. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed at first. Soryong barely reacted to his actions, until she remembered that her underwear was soaked and had become transparent. She immediately flushed red, realizing he could see everything, and tried to stop him. But when Lee Woo-sung leaned in her ear and told her to shut up, she froze instantly. Soryong was filled with anger and indignation, but she still let him finish what he was doing. In the end, he tied a damn knot on her belt, then used his sleeves to tie them tightly around her waist. Afterward, Lee Woo-sung straightened up and adjusted the position of the sleeves so that others couldn't see her underwear. As soon as he let her go, he jokingly asked why she was staring at him like that. The commander was too focused on the task to react until she shyly pointed out that his nipples had hardened. When she whispered that everything was exposed, he quickly looked her up and down. He enjoyed watching her embarrassed gaze dart back and forth when she saw him in his swimming trunks. Although he should have been the one to feel awkward, he deliberately moved closer to Soryong, catching her off guard. The moment he pointed out that he wasn't as soaked as she was, she shot out of the room like a rocket. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, it was the 5th week of impact training, which meant it was time for sparring. The commander announced the sparring pairs, and guess what? Sun Wook-chan and Han Soo-ryan, who had always hated each other, were paired up. The commander yelled for them to come forward and get their gear, and they did exactly as told. One by one, they received their equipment, the main piece of which was a huge helmet. Soryong looked as if she had never seen such a thing before, staring at the helmet in complete confusion. Meanwhile, Sun Wook-chan had already put on his blue helmet as usual, preparing for the fight. She was so busy looking at her opponent that she didn't even notice the instructor standing right in front of her. He calmly helped her put on the helmet, telling her to get a feel for it first before solidifying her fighting techniques. The moment she stepped into the ring, her furious opponent began to attack her with all his might. She did her best to protect her head, feeling the constant rain of kicks. Sun Wook-chan showed no mercy, wanting to vent all his anger on the girl, but at the last moment, she played her trump card. She forcefully struck the big guy's weak spot, causing him to double over in pain, his head hanging towards the ground. Seeing this, an instructor nervously asked the commander what kind of forbidden move that was. Despite this, he calmly replied that it was just her fighting dirty to survive. Watching his former target desperately fight a man twice her size, he suddenly felt like he had been played. He couldn't help but wonder if this was really the delicate girl who had lived with him and whom he had been deceiving all along. His mission was to maintain the marriage. So, from a moment they became close until he disappeared, the mission was effectively complete. He knew he no longer needed to monitor this changed owl, but something still made him complicate things. The commander was lost in thought, barely noticing the girl fall to the ground. He yelled for them to stop, but Sun Wook-chan finally had a chance to take her down and wasn't about to stop. The girl braced for another heavy blow to the head, but the next second she found her opponent gone. She turned her head and saw him lying spread-eagled on the mat, with Lee Woo-sung standing next to him. The commander tried to remain calm, but still asked him why he had to be told a second time. He pushed the team member away from the vulnerable girl and announced that today he would teach them Krav Maga. He added that it is a fighting system based on primitive human instincts, including intuition. The commander explained that its value lies in being able to disarm an armed opponent with bare hands. Then, with a predatory smile, he asked Sun Wook-chan if he wanted to take a shot at the instructor. The bruised and battered team member cautiously took the gun and then followed Lee Woo-sung's dangerous command. Before he could even aim, the guy knocked the weapon out of his hands. Bang! He simultaneously broke down the fighting process for the others, showing them how to block, dodge, and attack anywhere. In the end, he started pummeling the tough guy, beating him into a state of complete disorientation. The other team members watched nervously as he precisely struck vital points with attacks that could be fatal. Finally, he stood tall over the trembling team member and concluded that these attacks could inflict maximum damage. It seemed he had beaten Sun Wook-chan so badly that he stopped moving and became completely still. Lee Woo-sung explained that in Krav Maga, technique is far more important than brute force, so they could use it even if they weren't strong. Then he looked at the girl and said that they shouldn't back down just because their opponent is stronger. A few days later, the team members were having lunch, talking about how it was time to say their goodbyes considering the rigorous selection process. They hoped not to be assigned under instructor Lee Woo-sung, as the mere thought of being with him was terrifying. Soryong was completely clueless, so she asked what was going on, and they decided to explain it to her. It was said that Lee Woo-sung came from a private military company known for its brutality. They would hang you upside down, beat you unconscious, electrocute you, and inject you with things that destroy your nerves. After their chat, they gathered in a conference room for what Lee Woo-sung dramatically called torture training. He promised very seriously that the instructors would use every dirty trick to make them break. Therefore, the trainees had to memorize the coordinates they were given and not reveal them for 2 days. Soryong's coordinates pointed to Nevsky Prospect in St. Petersburg. She didn't know this at the time. Besides that, the commander said they would learn to overcome pain with willpower and how to handle themselves during an interrogation. Everyone was shocked when he slyly said he hoped to see them again with all their limbs intact. Then, one by one, they collapsed to the ground in a strange manner, as if they had been injected with a sedative. Soryong noticed everyone was acting strangely, as if something was wrong, but she was too tired and fell face first onto the floor. Before completely passing out, the last thing she saw was that detestable Lee Woo-sung glaring at her with a murderous look. Unknowingly, every single team member had fainted on the floor. The lights went out, and in her dream, Soryong relived the day her husband gave her that cold farewell over and over again. She remembered trying to stop him, sensing that something was very wrong with him. Knowing something was up, she practically begged him not to leave, even though she had no idea it would be the last time they would see each other. She knew how difficult the situation was and pleaded with him not to leave her alone, but he treated her with the same coldness. Tears welled up in her eyes when he coldly called her name, his voice devoid of any warmth. She couldn't see his face clearly that day, but she could feel his triumphant smile deep inside when he told her she was going crazy. Next, she woke up as if from a nightmare to find her hands tied above her head. Her gaze locked onto Lee Woo-sung's predatory eyes, and she knew instantly that he was the one who was going to torture her. He leaned back lazily in his chair, his eyes fixed on the girl who was hanging by her wrists, dressed only in her underwear. Soryong, seemingly not yet grasping the situation, directly asked if they had drugged the food. Hearing this question, the guy stood up and said with a triumphant smile that was a trade secret he couldn't reveal. She immediately tensed up when he recited her coordinates flawlessly and said he already knew what was on the note. Seeing her reaction, he announced that he wanted to hear something else from her today, so she shouldn't be making that face. The guy grabbed a retractable baton from the table and asked if she had ever thought about how they treat prisoners. He told her that in South Africa, they torture female prisoners by throwing them naked into cells with men. Lee Woo-sung tossed the baton aside and told her to imagine what would happen if she ended up in the hands of the Impact organization under their command. He gripped her chin forcefully and added very seriously that she would have to do the kind of dirty work that would completely destroy her. The commander mentioned how she was too embarrassed to even take off her pants in the water, knowing only half the story. Soryong couldn't hide her shock when he lifted her top, touched her chest, and said he would teach her personally. He openly taunted the girl, touching her where he shouldn't, making her feel even more humiliated and disgusted. After getting the reaction he wanted, he shamelessly lifted her clothes, saying he would show her what she was missing. Soryong demanded he let her go, but he immediately started talking about what happens to female soldiers when they are captured overseas. The girl cursed him with all sorts of foul language, but he continued to talk about the situation she would just have to endure. Afterward, he squeezed her breast hard and added that she should stop reducing everything to fighting spirit and pure ideology. Lee Woo-sung repeated that she was a burden and that she shouldn't even covet such a place, but should just live her normal life. It seemed he was enjoying his position, ordering her from the bottom of his heart to disappear and not even try. When he demanded she say she would stop looking for her husband, she just looked at him with an even more determined gaze. After making this demand, he backed away from the woman, and she asked if that was really what he wanted to hear. He only said that this was the last time he would speak to her like a human being and told her not to cross the line. Despite his direct threat, her face showed only pure contempt and hatred. Then, she suddenly spat in his face and said that if he wasn't going to help find her husband, he should get lost. This infuriated him even more, proving to him that the instructor's words meant nothing to her. It seemed she had really crossed the line, as he immediately poured a bucket of ice-cold water all over her. Without waiting for an answer, he yanked on the rope, forcing her to rise higher. Soryong demanded he let her down immediately, while he lifted and parted her buttocks with one hand. She told him to go to another room if he wanted to do it, but he just sneered back at her. A vein suddenly popped on his face as he angrily asked if she would rather sleep with someone else. Not really understanding what the consequences would be, Soryong said it would be 100 times better. This enraged the guy even more, and he finally said the name of instructor Jin Ho-jae. He suddenly asked if she would rather have that guy touch her, but Soryong hadn't even heard of him. Lee Woo-sung squeezed her, but asked if that country bumpkin looked like her husband, which completely infuriated her. He said that if she liked muscular guys who looked like rocks, then she had vision problems, but she agreed with him. The moment she said he did look like her husband, he immediately retorted that some men are worth looking at and some are not. When he said Jin Ho-jae was definitely the latter, Soryong called him a psycho and a pervert, and then he touched her. Afterward, Lee Woo-sung pressed against her menacingly and said that the time for kind words was over. The girl couldn't say a word as he touched her with his fingers, carefully observing her face. He took a sick pleasure in the way her body began to tremble from the movement of his hand. She tried to tell him to hurt, and he immediately judged her, telling her to relax. She completely disagreed. He paused and waited, and she cursed him as a bastard, telling him to just stick it in and shut up. After that, he added another finger, saying that her blind loyalty to her husband was getting on his nerves, and that it was more like a disease. He practically shoved his hand inside her, telling her she needed to let go of her obsession and give up everything. The moment he told her to live a normal life, she retorted that she needed her husband to live normally. She added that it was her husband who gave her things she was born with, but never had, things she could never enjoy in her life. She said she saw nothing wrong with blind loyalty, and then he bluntly asked if she was prepared to endure anything. He wanted to hurt her, but she suppressed her feelings and asked him what business it was of his if she ran away from him. Immediately after, she looked at the guy with an almost crazed look in her eyes and said that he had nothing in common with her beloved husband. It seemed she had struck a nerve with the instructor when she said that Jin Ho-jae had some redeeming qualities, so she didn't care. She told him to take the taser and shove it in her ear, but all he did was lift her leg. Afterward, he noticeably quickened the movements of his hand, making her body tremble with pain mixed with a hint of pleasure, saying he was disgusted that she compared him to her Hojo-looking husband, and he demanded she open her eyes. Despite being filled with hatred and pain, Soryong did as he said, watching everything he was doing to her body. His movements were so fast and precise that she couldn't help but feel an unexpected approach of the end. Despite Lee Woo-sung's best efforts to punish her, a flush of excitement appeared on his face when she let out a shameful, drawn-out moan. He immediately asked mockingly if she was already finished. At first, Soryong didn't react to his words until her gaze fell on his strained pants. I think at that moment, she realized again that he was blatantly attracted to her and that he wasn't just trying to conduct a test. Lee Woo-sung couldn't hide his surprise when she suddenly asked if he was going to take out his equipment after he was done with his fingers. All of a sudden, she completely changed, wrapping her legs around him and telling him to take it out and let her see how much it curved upwards. The guy was stunned by her words, but she just pointed out the most prominent feature of her husband in bed. Lee Woo-sung fell silent as she mused that the tip of his was slightly curved like a question mark and had a unique shape. She suddenly looked at him with a crazed look in her eyes, saying that his was also curved and that she could compare them quickly. The girl shamelessly pressed her private parts against him and added that she could make a career out of testing men with that kind of shape. Lee Woo-sung was so stunned by everything she was doing that he couldn't say a word for the first few seconds. Soryong suddenly said that she had always thought sex could only happen with her husband, but it turned out she was wrong. She added with a blank expression that they could try it with him, combining it with the torture training. The instructor was completely stunned while she stared mesmerized at his zipper and begged him to let her try. Although he felt a distant excitement about the whole thing, he just froze in disbelief. Afterward, he jumped away from the girl, grabbed the bucket, and said they would just pretend he hadn't heard her coordinates. Then he placed the bucket at her feet, saying that this prisoner was too damn pretty to give up all the information. Soryong asked in surprise about that, but he had already turned away, clutching his forehead in shock. He was trying to suppress a wave of anger and was about to say something about his thing, but was interrupted. Lee Woo-sung froze when the girl, like a predator, asked if instructor Jin Ho-ji was also quite well armed. Immediately after, he stormed out of the torture chamber, slamming the door behind him. A few days later, all the team members were gossiping about the details of the interrogation, and they knew that Lee Woo-sung had tortured Soryong. Another person said that the commander had beaten the instructor who tortured him, saying he wouldn't stop until he got the coordinates. He also said that if he leaked them again, it would be the instructor's fault for training him, so the instructor deserved the beating. He smashed the instructor with a chair the whole time, and it was a gruesome scene. The team members thought it was a form of psychological torture, but Soryong knew he was just venting his anger. She didn't know which instructor he had beaten until the team members started talking about who it was. In the end, she was shocked to find out that the instructor was Jin Ho-ji, whom she kind of liked. Just then, the person she was talking to mentioned her, talking about the 48-hour water torture she had endured. She decided to play along with the rumor, saying she was a little angry, but it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Then, with a predatory look in her eyes, she said that she felt more liberated, as if she had stepped into a realm she had never known. Her friend was terrified, thinking she had enjoyed the torture, but she just said it had opened her eyes to other things. Lost in thought, she shared that everything they did to her felt like breaking some kind of taboo. Meanwhile, Lee Woo-sung, whose taboo she had broken, was at the shooting range, venting his anger on the targets. He kept replaying her words about the most intimate detail of her husband, the one she knew best. Every time he thought of those words, he fired a shot, feeling the anger boiling under his skin. The guy couldn't forget the way she had looked at him so greedily, saying she wanted to do it with him. He stayed at the shooting range for so long that there were far more bullet holes in the target than he had planned. Feeling that even this wasn't helping, he narrowed his eyes wearily, realizing he couldn't even reclaim his own body from her. Suddenly, another instructor came up to him and casually talked about the beating of Jin Ho-ji as if they had practically tortured him. He just rolled his eyes when the commander asked if he was mad at him for bullying his buddy. Lee Woo-sung asked Gideon if they had been friends since they were kids, and he said yes. He was stunned when the guy suddenly started talking about how they must have often played together in the bathroom. Afterward, Lee Woo-sung put down his gun and slyly wondered what kind of goods Jin Ho-ji might be hiding down there. He walked away before he could finish, complaining that the hooting of the owls was driving him crazy. After leaving the shooting range, he once again became immersed in his obsession with how everything had gone wrong during the last operation. He was tired of their days together, tired of the walks where he had to play the doting husband. Despite this, he was struck by a strange feeling, like a kind of longing, because she just couldn't seem to let him go. He kept replaying her determined words, unable to figure out why she was so persistent. In the end, he realized he could no longer control Han Soryong and that he fucking had to make a choice. A few days later, the team members went to a lecture, excited about having recovery time after the torture. They chatted casually about how much they wanted to see their mothers and how pointless it was to regain their strength before the hellish course that lay ahead. It seemed only Soryong was constantly replaying fragments of the recent torture. The intense memories instantly made her cheeks flush, and she began to wonder if she was having a PTSD episode. Before she could clearly recall all the details of the torture she had endured, the man who had tormented her, the one she had punished, calmly walked into the room. Lee Woo-sung was lecturing on reconnaissance tactics in a monotone voice, but Soryong couldn't hear a single word. His voice was so monotonous that the team members fell right asleep while she doodled in her notebook. Finally, he started talking about Hell Week and how some of them would be sent to hot spots. He spoke grimly of those hells where evil runs rampant, saying that was precisely where mercenaries like them could shine. Afterwards, he said they would all go to hell for their sins and preach that garbage about every man for himself, and the devil take the hindmost. Soryong retorted sharply that if meeting God meant facing such a scene, then hell didn't sound so bad. She even added that if that was the only place they could meet, then she would go there. As she said that if she had to go, she would give it her all and enjoy it. Lee Woo-sung was staring intently at her. Their eyes met, and she instantly flashed back to that night during the torture when his gaze had stripped her completely bare. That night was all about what had happened between them, which made her blush and her heart race. The girl couldn't understand why she was so flustered, as if a strange feeling, a mix of excitement and fear, was growing inside her. After she finished speaking, the commander grinned and said she had a real knack for making a death wish sound so appealing. He suddenly let out a sarcastic chuckle, asking if they could really meet if they were just loitering at the gates of hell. When he mentioned that everything she knew was nothing more than images painted by others, all the memories came flooding back. Lee Woo-exin leaned in closer, asking how she planned to recognize him, and then decided to challenge her words. Finally, he concluded that even if God were standing right in front of her, she wouldn't recognize who it was. After the lecture, Lee Woo-shin walked straight to where Seo Ryong had been sitting. She was the only one who had initially left her notebook on the seat. He couldn't make out what the girl had written in her notes, so he decided to get closer for a better look. The instructor picked up the notebook and quickly flipped through it, looking at the short and scattered entries. But then, his eyes locked onto an obscene doodle, and he once again felt that familiar sensation of being driven completely mad by her. Hell Week officially began, and they made it clear that for a mercenary trapped in enemy territory, the hostile ground itself was hell. 7 days, without sleep, without changing clothes, without using the toilet. This was what they were about to experience in training. Each day was packed with grueling drills, pushing them step by step to the brink of collapse, suffering through exhaustion and sweat. So Ryan mentally asked her husband why she had to endure this torture just to catch him. Lee Woo-jin was relentlessly taunting everyone, stirring up a new wave of hatred and aggression within them. He smugly produced a bottle of whiskey, pointing out that they were surrounded by nothing but dirty water. The commander leaned down toward one of the team members with a sly grin, suggesting he could at least treat him to some good liquor. Then, with utter contempt, he began pouring bottle after bottle of whiskey over the heads of the team members holding a plank. So Ryan watched the disgusting scene with revulsion, knowing her turn might be next. After dousing a few team members, he immediately walked straight toward Hanso Ryan, clearly intending to speak with her. The man looked at the private with a serious expression, saying that situations on the battlefield were always crazy and unpredictable. He summed up all the dangerous situations she had been through in one sentence, saying that a commander needs to make quick decisions. He knelt on one knee before her and continued to lecture her on how a commander should act. Lee Woo-sung announced that up until now, he had only focused on dealing with the matter at hand, but that was about to change. After a brief pause, he suddenly poured the remaining water over her head, wishing her luck in the hell to come. After the planks, they went through a slew of other exercises, carrying rubber boats on their heads over and over. In addition to that, they also had to move quickly in the water and lift logs over their heads. One day during Hell Week, so Ryan felt like she was about to be driven mad by the insane amount of training, but she held on. Finally, Only the last few hours of Hell Week remained, which they had to spend on the freezing shore. Even the toughest soldiers looked exhausted and on the verge of collapse. Soryong turned to her partner with a wild look in her eyes. She said she couldn't hold on much longer. He tried to stop her, because losing consciousness meant elimination, but she just told him to shut up. She eventually drifted into a stupor, but before she did, she told her friend to avoid making eye contact. Avoid eye contact with Li Wuxin. Soryong's words seemed to make her partner even more nervous, and he snuck glances at the instructor from the corner of his eye. He prayed silently that the instructor would just walk past, ignoring him and Soryong. But Li Wuxin could smell fear like a predator, and he kept glancing toward the pair of friends. The tension grew heavier as he got closer, locking his target on Soryong. He also didn't miss the way the team member was checking if his teammate was asleep. The team member was trying to decipher the words the girl had scrawled in the sand to stay awake. The moment Li Wuxin saw her husband's name written in the sand, he immediately erased it, feeling as if another look would drive him insane. He froze above her, yelling and asking what godforsaken place she had crawled out of to drive him so crazy. But before he could finish, he noticed her eyes were tightly shut. He froze on the spot, annoyed that even in her half-asleep state, her thoughts were still of Kim Hyun. To calm himself, he quickly backed away, pretending not to have noticed anything. Her partner, meanwhile, continued to watch her closely while struggling against the cold sea wind. Meanwhile, Soryong had completely passed out, with only a slight tremor indicating she might wake up at any moment. Li Wuxin secretly watched her every move, as if making some kind of resolution. Finally, he walked away from the group and took a breath of the cold air, knowing that her future was now in his hands.